We're live. Lucy Cohen.
Hello.
It's been a few years.
It's been forever. It's too long.
I'm so excited for today. I'm sorry for everyone listening, but this is literally for me today, and I hope they get benefit. But we've been trying to kind of catch up for several years.
For ages.
Like you said, when we were just chatting before we started, COVID kind of took 2 years out as well. So I've got a nearly 4-year-old. I didn't see when I was pregnant, so that's
so it's got to be like 5 years. Yeah, just insane.
Maybe, yeah. So I'm just unbelievably excited to have you on. The fact that you're super cool, have a book out. We've got to plug the book,
obviously, yeah.
ladies and gents. She's an author. I have a very important person today, and also long-time friend. I miss our brunches. We've all there was 4 of us, wasn't there? You and Sophie, who run Mazuma, and then Amy Bateman, and then we've all kind of spread.
Life happens, man. You just end up like, everyone spreads out, and that's what happens when you get older.
Yeah, it's true, right? Because you're Swansea now.
I live in Swansea now. Yeah, so
I'm in Newport, so we've literally gone opposite directions.
Completely.
I'm not sure where does Amy live?
I think she's still in Cardiff. Soph's bought a farm and a small holding just outside Caerphilly. So she's off like living the farm life. Like it's got like a flock of sheep and some like 4 horses and stuff. So like that was always goals for her. Like that was always like what she wanted to do. So so she's like loving life there. So it's just we were all literally living Cardiff, like within about 2 miles of each other, and now we've just like like distance like magnets.
Gone, and it's like and then the scheduling, like trying to actually go, let's spend a day together, and then I look at my diary and I'm just like,
I tried to book in an appointment for something. I think it was like a doctor's appointment, something stupid, and the soonest that they could do simultaneously, and I could do was like in 6 weeks' time. I'm like, well, this is stupid, isn't it? Like, I keep trying to block time out of my diary and doing that thing of I'm going to put myself first and my own mental health first and like book things out. And it's keeping those boundaries is so hard because I want to do fun things keep happening and like interesting things keep happening. I'm like, I really want to do that thing. And so then I do it. I'm like, I've got too many things now. I'm doing too many things.
Yeah. So we met, I want to say I was 26. I'm 42 in July. So we're getting up to knowing each other for nearly 2 decades, dare I say it.
God, are we? Oh my God. Yeah, I would have been. So I'd have just started the company. So I would probably be about 23, 24. Yeah, so that's about right, isn't it? Because I'm 40 in January.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that's really interesting is the people I'm having on my podcast like, actually I've known them for a while, and this thing of like what time does. I was talking to Sabrina, who you know, and do deadlifting with last week, and we were talking about like how boring and unsexy what we all do actually is, and it's the time and the end results that look really sexy, but people don't really want to talk about that. They just want to go like, you wrote a book. You've got your own business. You won these awards. That bit's really sexy, right?
It's like being like being a 15-year overnight success, isn't it? Like that's what it is. Like it takes so much time. It's so boring. Like most of what I do on the day-to-day. So exactly what I said. Like, you run a business, you wrote a book, and all the rest of it. I'm like, writing a book is laborious.
Second book, right? Because I was just looking for your other one. I bought that, and I don't know where it is because it was a few years ago. No, so
I wrote the Millennial Renaissance, which is about millennial finances really, and this kind of outdated concept. So I'm a little bit obsessed with like generational discrepancies between how we view finances. And the concept that we're I think our generation in particular is probably the first generation it's been very missold to. So we grew up with the kind of status quo that go to university without tuition fees, go to university, you get a job, you work there for 40 years, you put into your pension, you have your retirement, you get your state pension, and that's how you do life.
And somewhere along the lines you buy a house, and that's relatively simple.
Yeah, because houses are like, I don't know, a couple of times your income, and and no one wanted insane deposits and all that kind of stuff. And the housing market wasn't kind of this mess that we see. This kind of, it was before the housing boom in, what was that, 2008, 2006, 2008?
Well, 2002 to 2007, then it all went.
And then the credit crunch,
it didn't really go, everyone kind of went, it's gone blur, but it didn't really go blur. There was a bit of I'd say a minor correction on the tripling of the 1996 to 2007.
Yeah.
Then everyone went, oh my God, house price has gone down 25%. It was like, but they just tripled.
So 25% actually
300 not that big a deal.
Well, it's like business growth, isn't it? Like, it's not linear. It's like you know.
Yeah.
So yeah. So yeah. So I kind of a bit obsessed with this idea of how we look at money and what it means,
Yeah.
because yeah. So we kind of grew up, I suppose, with this idea of what life would look like with money. You know, this is what you do with the money. This is, you should always save money. You should
Mm.
always have 3 months in the bank or whatever. I've literally never met anyone in my life who's got like 3 months worth of salary in the bank. Like, no one. Like it's like, it's so rare, because we don't, because you find things to spend your money on, and do you know what? Good. Spend your money, because like, spend it wisely, but spend it, because you literally can't take it with you. I'll come on to me being ill last year and like really kind of reinforcing that point. Um,
Yeah, right.
but yeah, so we kind of grew up with this idea, and like millennials, so I'm an elder millennial, sort of born in 83, so kind of I think 81 is like the kind of the last of the millennials, like the
So
last of the
I'm the
Mohicans.
horrible generation before that, right? So
Oh,
I'm get
you're like the gap in between, aren't you? You're like weird.
yeah,
Were you 81 or you 80?
80.
80. Oh, so you're
80.
just, you're just outside that cusp.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, and it's just like, I started looking at this, and I started looking at there's this kind of everyone loves labeling stuff, so millennials,
Mm.
boomers, all this kind of stuff. And
Mm.
on one hand, maybe it's not particularly useful, but on another hand, it is quite useful to kind of
I
frame
think it's a
what
good start. I think labeling's a good start, but if you get stuck in labeling,
yeah,
game over. Because
yeah.
then everyone just, it is that way and there's nothing you can do about it. And that's when labeling just collapses. But
Uh,
it's a good start to go, well, what's the what so of right now?
yeah, and it's a really good way to frame a collective experience of a set of people. So to
Yeah.
give that a group label, it's a really good way to frame that, and people can find things in common, and then you can kind of,
Mm.
I love a bit of data. You can get a
Yeah.
data set off a
So
group
I
of
just want to,
collective people.
just for those who don't know you, you're effectively, so you and Sophie built a brilliant accountancy firm, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
your background is accounting, math,
yeah.
figures, and that's
Numbers.
what you're passionate about. So the other thing to I think share, so that for people who don't know you, is you built a business on something that you love, and you also disrupted that whole old school. I mean, I remember meeting you guys in BNI, which was where we met, the networking event, and it was that whole, you don't look like accountants, you don't
Yeah.
sound like accountants, you want stuff in an envelope monthly, what's that all about? So for those who don't know you and what you do, you are an accountant, but you're not your average accountant, and you've seriously disrupted that, and that's where your passion comes from. So that's when people are listening to you, that's where you're speaking from, right? You're not just going, oh, I think this is like, you've got a whole background in business, money, accounting,
Yeah.
building a successful business and all of that. So sorry, carry on.
Yeah,
I
no,
just wanted
thank
people
you.
to
It's
know
probably worth
that
pointing out my
context.
qualifications for talking about
Yeah,
this. I'm not
yeah,
just
like
some random you
you
picked
know
up
your
off the
shit.
street.
You know what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
So Sophie and I started again to disrupt accounting. In fact, again, labeling. The first
Mm,
business advisor we ever saw told us that we couldn't do it. There was a terrible idea, and you shouldn't try to rebrand accountancy. And in fact, since we existed before cloud accounting, so the way that we were
mm,
working, put it in an envelope, send it to every month. We've gone
mm.
on now. We've developed our own technology, so we're now kind of shifting into that kind of fintech space. Still, the end offering's the same, but we've been
Yeah,
developing our own technology. And again, I just don't like that label. If you're an accountant, this is what you do. I like to know
yeah,
what accountants do at their core is provide advice and support to small businesses. How we decided to kind of slice it up and do it looks different to your standard, but that's fine.
yeah.
But yeah, I
Mm.
just kind of on the money thing. So
Yeah, so the millennials and the old way of doing stuff.
yeah, I just kind of, so that was what the first book was about, and it was about
Mm,
kind of, look, you know, do you want a retirement? Is that, is that what
mm,
what does what does that mean? What does that actually mean? There's people like, oh, I want to retire by the time I'm 40 or whatever else. Does that mean you're never going to do anything again? Does that mean you're
mm,
only going to like go and play golf or only go hiking? Like, what does that actually look like? Or
mm.
do you just mean you don't want to do something anymore that doesn't make you happy in order to swap it for money? And that's the
Yeah,
difference, I think. So when I
yeah.
came on to, I actually started writing Forget the First Million in April 2019, and
Mm-hmm.
started kind of like yes, because I was looking for the Instagram post where I'd said like accountability, I'm putting it here, and then didn't do anything with it for ages. So that didn't work. But yeah, I started writing it then again with this concept of, when you and I started businesses, and I've spoken about this before, but like things like Dragon's Den were like super popular, and everyone was like, you know, get the expert into your business, sell some shares, super growth, like 20x, all this stuff, like rah rah rah. And it like loads of people like massively bought into that, myself kind of included. I was in my early 20s and I was like, yeah, I want to like do this and I want to have this in my bank account and all the rest of it. And then as I kind of like, as you grow a business and it's not linear, like you go woo and then you go and then you go woo and then you go, oh, that for a bit.
It takes way longer. I think the theme for me is it takes way longer than people, you know, coaching people now in my mission mastermind and they're building businesses. It's like, have some patience.
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight. It takes a bloody long time to do anything of consistent value. Like you can get lucky and suddenly have a hit and that's fine, but don't expect that just because that one thing happened once is going to keep happening. Like that's where the wisdom and the coaching comes in, is like, yeah, it's amazing you had this like hit, but actually, you know,
sustainability.
Yeah, you can't keep doing that. Yeah, I kind of got into this idea of like, and it kind of happened with we were looking at like Sophie and I were looking at like what we've been running the business 16 years now. What do we want our lives to look like? What do we want to achieve at the end of it? If we never exited in the traditional sense, what does that look like? Do we do we keep say chairing but not have an involvement? And it was just about kind of what that means. I started kind of analyzing what I thought about money, and I come from a background, so all my family are kind of creatives. They're all like actors and dancers and musicians, so starving artists. Like there was not a lot of money around when I was a kid, so it became quite important to me. And it became important to me kind of looking at it not because I like money, but I like the freedom it offers you. So that's the thing. And obviously your podcast called Financial Freedom, so very much on brand there. It's about working it in a way that gives you the things you want in life. And I think when people say like, people always like, it's that fun thought experiment in like, oh, if I won the lottery, I'd, or if I had £1 million tomorrow, I'd. And actually the things they do aren't I'd have Jay-Z round for dinner every night, or I'd have Rihanna play my birthday party. They don't say those things. They say things like, I'd like make sure my family had enough money, and I'd pay off my mortgage, and I'd go on holiday 3 times a year. And those are really normal things that you can achieve without having to have
without winning the lottery.
Yeah. So it just started. I started thinking about that, and especially in the business sense, because that money piece. Most people don't run businesses just to make money. You can't, because it'll kill you. Like it'll just kill your soul. And we all know people who do things only for money. I think they're a type of person that most of us probably don't really like that much, because there's
such a tiny percentage.
Like
but loud, and lots of people see them because of the results.
Yeah,
but they're not.
They're not normal.
Workaholics, usually their personal lives are a shit show.
Miserable.
All they do is work, and they're usually pretty unhappy because they're trying to fill the void with money, and there's no money in the world that'll fill it. Just like there's no heroin in the world that'll fill a void, or alcohol, or sugar,
or food, or whatever else. Yeah, because they're ultimately something's missing. And so the book, I called it "Forget the First Million," because like when I make my first million, I'm like, right, forget the first million. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what do you want your life to look like? Do you want to work 12 hours a day? Is that what gives you joy? Cool. Do that. Do you want to work a 4-hour working week and then spend the rest of your time, I don't know, knitting yogurt or whatever you love doing? Do that. But build it in a way that kind of works for you, and don't have this kind of hang up on, first of all, I don't know many retired people who don't do something. Like they've all got
retired. I've never worked harder.
Like they don't do something, they've got a thing to do. So that is work, but the difference is we only define work as things that we swap for money, and that's not true. Unpaid labor is labor. Non-paid work is work. So let's reframe that concept of what we do for money versus what we do to fulfill our lives. If the two things happen to collide, brilliant. But if not, doesn't matter, because you can work it. Yeah, so it's around that really, and it's around, and then some practical things as a business owner, just like stuff like get your cash flow in order, make sure you're billing people properly. Don't forget, I loved
it for that, because there was there's some practical in here, like do this. Have you thought about that? You talk about therapy, you talk about taking an inventory of yourself. It's actually practical advice. It's not just like, oh, this is how it's like, go and do this.
Yeah. Go and go and take an interview yourself. Go and list out your top suppliers and figure out, go and list out all the things you spend money on. Do you need them all? Have you got like direct debits? Because we've all got them, things we signed up for as a trial and forgot about, and they cost £5, but ultimately they all add up. Oh, because I'm such a I'm like, oh, new shiny bit of technology. I like sign up for the trial, completely forget about it. I'm like, why am I paying £12.99 for this thing? What's that? Oh yeah, it's that. Like I have to literally every 8 weeks I have to go to my bank and go, I'm not using that. And my Apple subscriptions, like I'm not using that. I'm not using that. I'm not using that. Just like clear them out because I'm like, oh, this is going to change my life. Brilliant idea. Sign up for this like reading app or something. I never use it. So yeah, I have to like check myself. And those are all things in the book. They're all things I do. So they're all things that I like keep on top of myself. Especially the boundaries bit.
Yeah, massive, right? And enforcing boundaries. I think that's the biggest thing I probably talk to my clients about, whether it's money, relationships, their business, their employees, walking the bloody dog, their kids. It's like, there's boundaries, and then are you gonna hold them up? You're gonna enforce them? Are you gonna
And it's really hard to do because actually I think a lot of us are taught not to enforce boundaries. We're taught that our time is the least important time against everybody else's, whether that's and again it comes down to this kind of cultural societal expectation, this kind of idea that children are supposed to look after their parents or grandparents, and this kind of generational kind of trade-off of, well, I gave you life so you should look after me, or like did I consent to that? I don't remember that being part of my conversation, but there we are. Or there's and so like it goes the other way. Like I don't have kids, but as a parent, you make the decision to bring a life into the world. So you've chosen to offer that support, and you hopefully raise a functioning adult, and then you have that adult transactional analysis relationship. You don't have parent-child forever. It doesn't go like that forever. You become adult.
Well, I'm going to say it doesn't have to go like that. Unfortunately, mainly in society, most people, when they go home, when they're adults, to their parents' home, it is parent-child.
They regress massively.
Totally regress. And actually, one of the biggest things I think that is, if we all had in society this aim that once we're 18, we're now responsible for ourselves.
Yep.
And actually did that adult transactional, like that. Oh my God, the world. We'd probably have world peace. I mean, it's a massive thing.
It's a huge thing. I think it goes both ways because I see parents who go into, as soon as a 34-year-old child, picking up the laundry. And actually, I was just saying to you off camera, my husband and I moved in with his parents for 3 months while we work on our house done. And I wasn't worried about this at all. I get on really well with his parents. We have a very adult relationship. Like they're nice people. I've got friends their age. Like I'd hang out. You're like me. You've got friends of all ages. I'd hang out with them.
I'm the same with all our parents. I've got multiple bonus parents because of both our parents are divorced. So there's 4 sets of grandparents for our kids, and I'd hang out with them anyway.
Exactly. Like they're cool people. I'd have colleagues that age, like, so I didn't have any issue, but I think my husband was a little bit like, and he's a grown up. He's more of a grown up than me, but he's a grown up. And I think he was a little bit worried about whether he'd like sort of regress or not, but he didn't. I was like, that's so nice to see. And in fact, when it came to like just domestic stuff when we're there, like, not that I cook, he cooks, but like he'd do the cooking like a few nights a week, and we didn't go into the house and expect his mum would do everything or his dad would do everything. It was all very adult, and that made me really happy. And I was kind of like, this is what it should be like. This is like how this should go.
You've made it when you can be like that with your parents and with your partner's parents.
Yeah.
Right? Like anyone listening to this is going, oh my God, that's so not me. It's like, do the work, because it's the most freeing thing ever.
Go to therapy.
From parent-child.
Yeah. And lack of expectation, like stop expecting people to do stuff for you. Like it's lovely when they do. Like it's really, really nice when people do stuff for you, but you can't expect it, because when you set an expectation that nobody else has signed up to, like you've just made it up in your head. Because most of our expectations we've just randomly made up in our heads. Like no one's ever gone to you, by the way, darling, I know I birthed you. This is what you can expect from me for the rest of your life. They've not done that. They've never told you. We've made it up from society, from culture, from osmosis, from films, from everything we consume. We've got this kind of concept that this is how things should go.
How things should be. Yeah.
And that's just rubbish, isn't it? If anything in the last 2 years has taught us, there is no way things should be. There are the way things are and the way things we can work towards getting them, but there's no way things should be. With, I suppose, some caveats like people should be nice to each other. People should be respectful and all that kind of stuff. But again, you can't expect it from people. You can't walk around life expecting everyone to be nice to you. Like, they're not, and you get to choose how you respond to that. Like, that's your choice. But yeah, so yeah, we kind of this, and it really seeps into money. It really seeps into how we play with money. If you've had parents that have always, I know so many people whose parents have always bailed them out. Like, there is nothing wrong if you come unstuck asking for help at some point. That's a very adult thing to do, to go, I've come unstuck, this is what I need, this is where I need help, this is my plan to deal with it. Are you able to help me?
This is how I'll pay you back.
This
Would
how
you
I pay
like
you
an
back?
interest rate? Are my two favourite things to add into that. And then it's like clean. It's like lending from a bank.
Exactly. And yeah, I've had that conversation a few times over my life, and it's
Me
always
too.
it's always like set out. But
Yeah.
I know people who will get themselves into trouble and
Yeah.
then just expect someone to bail them out. So I'm like, well, what happens when banker mum and dad stops? Or what happens if you don't have a banker mum and dad? Like, how are you gonna cope out there, like, if things go wrong? So yeah, I suppose it's into, like, it's a combination. The book's a kind of combination of my rambling thoughts on that, I suppose, but also some practical stuff, like, especially if you're running a business, because if you're running a business, you're pulled in so many different directions. Your CEO, your cleaner, your receptionist, your marketing manager, you're all these things, and to all people, and you forget to put yourself first. And do you know what? I like the best one of the piece of advice that stuck with me the most was, like, Robert Kiyosaki, when in Rich Dad Poor Dad, when he says pay yourself first. I read that really early on in my business journey, and it just always stuck with me, because it's so true. If you don't pay yourself first, you'll fall to the bottom of the list and you'll end up with the dregs. Whereas if you pay yourself first, actually somehow you'll make payroll for everyone else. It just works. So yeah, it's just about that, really, and about kind of some practical steps to make running a business a bit more fun. Because it should be fun. You should enjoy it.
I really agree with that. And I think there's a whole world of balance, like, it's going to be hard work and it's fun. So actually, do it, like, enjoy it, suck up all of it, the shit, the good, the bad, the ugly, the whole world of it. So what do you say? What's your thoughts on the housing market, what it's like for younger people today? I can't believe I'm saying that. I'm getting old, clearly.
We're old. We're old as the hills.
The youngsters, Lucy, what do they do now with the property market?
They're all there just being influenced on TikTok. Like, that's what they do now, these kids. On the TikToks. That's what they're up to.
Yeah, I was foraying on TikTok the other day. I was like, is this something I need to consider? Should I be doing this? Do I stay with... Is YouTube on its way out? Does TikTok... all of that? Well, I'm just like, oh my God, I can't.
It's a lot, isn't it? There's just a lot. It's a lot. Like, I never got into Snapchat, and I read, like, it's the biggest like social media giant, Snapchat, and, like, it just passed me by entirely. And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, completely. I just missed that.
I think it's our age. It's just,
I just missed Snapchat entirely. But I'm very much a voyeur on TikTok. Like, I just like watching people. But I'm on cooking TikTok and home organizing TikTok. I don't think I'm on cool TikTok. I think I'm not like,
but in
watching
a way,
people do dances.
That's kind of magic about it. I mean, and I got interested in it because Gary Vaynerchuk was talking about it. About how it is that you can have cooking TikTok and you can have multi-generational, and like Facebook. None of the kids are on Facebook because their parents are on it, and they're like, no. But on TikTok, he was talking about how, if a kid sees something they think their parent will be into, they'll share it with them, and there's a whole world where it's, all of that world. So it's like,
I read a statistic that TikTok is searched more than either Google or YouTube for, like, advice videos for, like, how to do stuff. Like, TikTok is now the go-to, like, beauty influencers, DIY, all that stuff. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting platform. I love watching it. And
do you post anything on there? Do you do
no
any...
Like I said, I'm very much a voyeur at the moment, but it is on my list of things to do this year, in that I will start playing with it. And I had a couple of ideas of what I might do on there. I thought of one idea I might do, which is, if anyone starts doing this, I did it first, so
you saw it here first, folks.
This is accountability. I'm gonna have to do this, like, today, otherwise someone's gonna get it before me. But I was like, there are some great business books out there, but there are some absolutely horrible business books as well, with, like, terrible advice or completely unattainable advice, like, written by, like, people who had billionaire parents. So, like, was it Kim Kardashian, like, love her or hate her, whatever else. she got absolutely berated for saying recently, like, women just have to work harder to get to where they are. I'm like, that's really easy to say when you've had significant advantages in your start. Like, we're not all coming from the same start point here. Like,
that's a huge conversation that's not had, right? About like dealing with, I think I did a thought of the week on this a few weeks ago about deal with where you're starting from.
yeah, we're not all coming from the same place.
That. It's like if you're starting with nothing and your parents don't even own their own house and you don't have a job,
your options are more limited than Kim Kardashian. Yeah. Even down to things like so one of the reasons I didn't go to university, I did all my training whilst I worked, was because I'd originally was going to go and do a degree in drama, which is seeing me talk is probably not that surprising, but it's a million miles away from where I ended up in my career. You know, I'm quite a diva, so yeah, it sort of makes sense. But I was the first year that I would have had to pay tuition fees. So I think I was the first year that kind of applied to. I would have had to have taken the maximum amount of loans because my parents couldn't have supported me through university, because we grew up in a world where saving for your kids to go to university wasn't a thing. So it got thrown in.
No one expected you to go, so why bother?
Or people expected university to be free, like it was for our parents. University, you didn't have to pay tuition fees back then. You got grants. And that culture completely disappeared in about 2 years when I was in sixth form. So suddenly there was no pot for. It makes me laugh when people have like a pot for their kids to get married, but no pot for university. That's I came in that place. That was where, like, although we didn't have that either. But paying. So I'd have had to take the.
If there was a pot, it would have been for getting married, not for uni, right?
If there was a pot, it wouldn't have been for a house, but it would have been for like marrying me off to some dude. So it came from there was no like, here's the college fund or anything else like that, and it just taking on a bunch of debt when I didn't know what my earning potential would be at the end of it. And I talk about this in my first book. What's the cost benefit analysis of university, really? Taking on a load of debt
these days on a scale that's
look at the interest rates just going up on student loans.
Yeah.
You want to be paying 7%? Like, you could literally get a bank loan for less now. That's ridiculous. Like, that's ridiculous. So and that's that level of interest rate is excluding a whole set of people from university. It's a preventative measure. It's stopping people accessing further education. Yes, there is an argument that you need to do a cost benefit analysis for university, because it didn't work out for me. I was like, well, I'm taking on a bunch of debt. I don't really know what I want to, like, I don't know what am I going to do with a drama degree. And I didn't feel comfortable, again, coming from the views of debt and what that means came from a place where debt was bad. My dad used to call his credit card the never never. So it'll stick it on the never never. So kind of this concept of debt was terrifying, and just decided not to go. So there was, I can't remember why I started talking about university, but anyway, so I did all my training. So taking on all this debt just didn't seem like a brilliant idea. How did I get to university? Where did this come from?
We were talking about we started off with how do we deal with what kids are doing today? Housing market, kids today, what do you say about that? All of that world. And there's that whole world, like, university is just, for me anyway, the thing that I say to people is like, is there a reason to go to university, or are you just going because that's what people do? Because the number of people I know with degrees that they don't use and like 40 grand's worth of debt, I'm like,
exactly.
And it's cost benefit analysis, and people don't do it, right? They don't think about it like that.
I also think that we're asking, life is long, right? So, and we're asking people to decide upon a vocation when they're 18. 18. Like, I was an idiot. That's and yes, there are things that take longer to train at, so medicine, dentistry, things like that. And some people have a calling, some people have a real passion for what they do, and
they want to do that, what they want to do,
and they know, and they're aligned with it, they're academic or whatever else, and great, that's the path for them, that's what they should be doing. If you're just going to university because you did 3 A levels and you don't really know what to go and do next, if you don't really know what to go and do next, go get a job somewhere and figure out what you like doing all day. Do you love sitting in an office for 8 hours? Do you love working on a construction site? Do you like knocking doors, selling things? Like, what do you love doing? Go and do some horrible jobs. And actually, it's probably more beneficial. Figure out what you really don't want to do. So I worked in I worked in film and TV. I'm a massive blagger. I managed to blag my way into working on films for a couple of years before. So I took a gap year, managed to blag my way into working on films. Did it for 18 months and realised I hated it. Absolutely hated it because
Imagine though you've gone to uni to do it because you thought
and I
that
had
might
all
be
that
cool.
debt. I had like 30 grand of debt, and then I do my first like film and it's terrible. Everyone's rude to you. You have to work with I had to work with people who were bigger divas than myself, and I wasn't famous, so I couldn't be a diva. And you spend 12 hours a day stood around in wet fields, and I was like, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. This looks terrible. Like there's got to be easier ways to make money. So I ran a business. Obviously, that was easy. But you know, it was definitely easier. Drier, like I get to be inside most of the time. So yeah, it was kind of I think you have to do that cost. If anyone young is listening to this, like you, or they've got kids, you've got to do that cost benefit analysis because it's 2 years, isn't it? Like go and work, go and do some horrible jobs, go and figure out what you hate doing, go and figure out what again, going back to like forget the first million financial freedom. What do you want your day to look like? And we've all had this kind of I think we've all been able to assess that a lot more over the last 2 years with kind of enforced the lockdowns and things like that. What's really important to you? Is it
like when everything's taken away and the possibility of everything's taken away, what still sticks and what do you go back to 2 years later? In that sense, COVID has been epic from a beneficial way.
It's
tragic,
been super tragic, but
beneficial.
A kind of like collective therapy. Everyone kind of accelerated through probably about 6 years of expensive therapy to figure out what they really wanted. You do the thought experiments. If everything was taken away from you, what do you still keep? Well, it was. So, and for some people, their health, their health got taken away, and you really start, you really start questioning like, what do you really want? And and that's if we're talking about like teaching, we don't teach kids about money. Why don't we teach kids about money? Like if we're talking about money, because money and lifestyle are implicitly linked, because the society we live in, that's the bargaining chip. That's how you get the things you want with the money thing. That's how you do it. And until we all go back to living in communes and exchanging leaves, that's what we're going to keep doing. So to get that freedom, you've got to play the game a little bit. You've got to at least understand the game. But figure out, do you need, because let's face it, if you've got a job, no matter how much money you earn, you will spend all of it.
100%.
Always.
Yeah. And it's always. in the best way I like saying to people, because they go, oh no, that's not true. I go, how many pay rises have you had? And have you got any more money? And they're like, oh,
you're not earning the same money you earned when you started your career, and yet you still got an overdraft
still
and no money.
And
that's what we do. So, and that's the point, isn't it? Like we keep upgrading our lives, and what we're saying isn't that I want to have £1 million in the bank, because that's ultimately completely meaningless. You can have £1 million in the bank and live like a pauper and never spend it. So that money is completely pointless. The point of it is that it gives you choice, options, and freedom to do things, and that's kind of, I think that's a balancing act, isn't it?
Yeah. And what are your thoughts on the property market, prices?
Like, I'm not a property aficionado. I own a house.
No, but from your side of things,
point of view, So I own a house. I've got a little Airbnb in Cardiff. So
yes, of course, I forgot about all of that.
Little Airbnb.
Igloo, yeah, cool.
Yeah. So I've got a little Airbnb in Cardiff, which is lovely to have. I think that, I mean, obviously you're the expert here, but I think that there's kind of maybe two ways to sort of look at property. Property is, for me, it's two things. It's the first of all, property and where I live is my home. So for me, my home is not a money-making exercise. My home is somewhere that I spoke to you again off camera. I'm super environment sensitive. So like my environment has to be kind of, I know when the thing's out of place. Like my environment has to be, I nest. As soon as I get in anywhere new, I'm like, paint it, change it, like make it all how I want it. So my home is my home, and it costs money, and I have a mortgage or whatever else, and that's kind of like in its box on its own. I think there's opportunities with property to provide home, housing, and spaces for other people, and that's interesting. And you can do that by making investments, and that's something different in terms of getting onto the ladder. I think this kind of idea of you have a salary, the bank will lend you save up 10%, the bank will lend you 3 times your salary, and then you're going to get a house, it's unrealistic for most people across the UK, when you look at the average house price and you look at the average salary, going down that traditional route of property ownership probably isn't there for a lot of people. But it doesn't mean, as we said before, like labeling stuff, it doesn't mean you can't do it. You've just got to be a bit more creative. You've got to like pitch in with other people, or buy different sorts of properties, and then work it in a different way. But I do think that for, if you're going, and this is where this kind of idea of, I wouldn't advocate anybody to go down the route of go to high school, go to university, get a job, work in that job forever, own a house, and that's it. Because actually, that route probably won't give you what you need. If you've got kind of ambitions of financial freedom, it'll give you that traditional route. But you look at all the times over the decades that people have been screwed by that, endowment mortgages or financial products that have not worked. You're
retiring at the wrong time, so
Yeah.
the pension pot isn't the right size.
There's still a risk there. You're literally and also, if life doesn't work out how you think it's going to, there's a massive privileged assumption there that you're going to make it to 65, that nothing bad's going to happen that's going to sap away your savings, or sap away, or that you're not going to have to remortgage because something terrible happens in your personal life and you need the cash there. So that assumption that life is going to be that kind of beige, and then you're going to end up with a kind of predictable end result, I don't think serves anybody. I think for kids getting on the property ladder now, they probably need to be a bit more inventive if they want to kind of buy somewhere. And it might mean that the first property they buy isn't a house they live in. It might be that it's something else that kind of serves them for a time until they can move to the next stage. The ladder's still there. You've just got to kind of access it differently, I think. I feel like I was lucky I bought when I did.
Yeah, and I think it's, it's interesting as well. I'm a bit of a hard ass when it comes to that, and everything's nuanced, right? I'm like, you need to bloody move to where you can afford it, and I can say that because that's what I did, right? I moved to Tom Revel when no one wanted to live in Tom Revel. Everyone was, living in Cardiff Bay and all of that world. So I kind of have I've earned the right to say to people, fucking move to somewhere where you can afford it. And I'm also aware that people are like, no, but all of my everything, if you're in Bristol or London or Bath or pretty much anywhere in England, probably south of England, and that's where your life is. I get that's really hard. So that was a very eloquent way of kind of saying it, or actually buy something, like what my groups do. They're actually focusing on rentals. They're not focusing on buying main residences. I didn't buy my own, I'm in a main residence now at 42, but actually for decades prior, I was buying houses. I wasn't living in any of them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a way of accessing it. So if you are, if the money you're earning in your job isn't going to be allowing you to save up the deposit you need, and let's face it, so just in the area we live, we looked, I was telling you, we did a big refurb, and we looked at moving because we want the kind of open living space. And this is quite a big house, but I moved to Swansea, where house prices aren't as high as they were in Cardiff, apart from now, because again the property market's going to change because people can now work from anywhere. So we are noticing, and the job market is changing as well. So first of all, I'm finding it very hard to hire developers at the moment because we've got people coming and living in Swansea who are keeping their London salaries and are trying to ask like 70 grand for what was previously a 45 grand job down here. So that London bubble is spreading. Maybe house prices in London will go down, but they're going to go up everywhere else. We're finding in Swansea that house prices are just skyrocketing. So I live in a great little location, moved here before everyone realized that everything was very Cardiff centric, but Swansea's had a bunch of investment put into it. Loads
Huge
going on.
amounts of money.
Huge, yeah. And I sit on the economic strategy board for the City Bay deal, so I'm seeing all this kind of stuff happening. And house prices have gone up since I moved here, and then post COVID, people are moving. I live a 5-minute walk from the seafront, and I live on the back of a gigantic park. And I've got a little village around the corner, which has got like a shop and a bakery and a hairdresser and a coffee shop and a little wine bar in it, And I bought this house for like 289 6 years ago. And it's like the houses 2 miles either way. No one on my road moves, so there's no like comparable house prices. But 2 miles away are 150, 200 grand more. And just in because people are coming out of London and going, I can do my job from anywhere on my laptop. I've proved that now. They need me more than I need them. I'm off to go and live in the countryside. So people are. So I think that's going to change well. And it's a case of putting a bit of time in to figure out, like, how can I do this? Like, let's be creative here. Like, let's be a bit creative. Or investing in something else and something differently, and going, I'm going to rent, and I'm going to be cool with renting, and I'm going to invest my money elsewhere and make money elsewhere, and that's fine as well. In Europe, rental is a much bigger thing than it is kind of
Common,
as a life. Germany, France, is a lifelong thing, and people just rent forever, and I'm sure that their happiness indexes are higher than ours anyway, so they must be doing something right. They're not miserable.
Something works.
Yeah, something works.
Yeah. And so what do you do? And obviously, tell me to mind my own business. What do you do from an investment point of view or pension point of view? What's your personal strategy? You obviously don't have to tell us the figures, but like, how do you do it? What's your plan, or is the business the plan? What's
fingers in a lot of pies? So I have a little Airbnb, and I'm hoping to add another couple into that over the next couple of years. I like them. I like the rent to rent thing. It's easy. It's cute. Yeah, I like it.
Everyone wins, right? They're brilliant because everyone does what they're good at. Everyone wins.
I always stay in Airbnbs. Like, I love staying in like interesting properties. Like, I've stayed in some great ones over the years. And if you're traveling, it's a great way to get places in a non-traditional way. It's a brilliant way of. They were very, I love a bit disruptive, and they're a very disruptive industry in terms of disrupting
massive,
hotels.
right? Yeah.
I do love as well, though, because everyone like, hotels are dead. I'm like, hotels aren't dead, because hotels offer you things that Airbnb can't. If I'm traveling on my own and I'm doing like one night somewhere, I'll stay in a hotel, because I need to get somewhere. I need to eat. I need to like all the rest of it. I can't be faffing around with key changeover and stuff. Like, hotels offer convenience, but you pay a premium for that. If you want to go and visit somewhere interesting, Airbnb is fantastic. So I love it as a model anyway. So I've got one of those. I want to add a couple more into that. I have a traditional pension, so I have a financial advisor, and I contribute to like a traditional pension. I've been doing that for about 10 years now. So again, I'm my own employer, so I don't have any of that kind of employer contribution stuff going on. So, and there are some companies out there that still offer great pension schemes for staff, and if you have the option of it, I'm like, you may as well put something in there. Like, they're putting in 10%, you may as well.
Absolutely, right. It's like a no-brainer.
Absolutely. If they're saying you do 6, I'll do 10, I'm like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Do it. Just put the money in. It comes out your payslip. You're not going to notice it. Do it as soon as you start there. You won't even notice the difference. As you said, you'll always spend all the money you have anyway, so you may as well stick it in there.
And it's in the realm of pay yourself first, isn't it? Actually putting that money into your pension is paying yourself first.
It is. You get a tax break on it, and you may as well, especially if you've got an employer contributing as well. I don't have that, but I still can contribute in that. I have a barn project in France, which
how's that going?
Oh, terribly.
Because financing is really tricky, right, for that now.
Thanks to Brexit. I had a mortgage that was going through on it, and literally on the 1st of January, the mortgage company rang me and like, they pulled all the funding from UK residents mortgaging in Europe. Yeah, but I've not lost hope. Obviously, then COVID happened, so it's kind of it's secure. It's got a roof and foundations and windows and doors. It just hasn't got anything inside it yet. So once I can figure out how I'm going to fund that, I'll get that done, and then I'll rent that out as an Airbnb. So that'll be, I can go over there because I love France. I feel like my spirit nationality is French. Like, they love cheese and wine, and they're quite anarchic. So I think that's kind of like my spirit nationality. I kind of enjoy that slight anarchism. So I'll be able to live part-time there and then rent that out the rest of the time, because I want to have, I like being quite remote. Again, lifestyle. I don't need a ton of money to do that, but I can live a life with some land around me. And I bought that barn. It was a complete ruin. I bought it for like €1,000 because no one wanted it in France, because they don't like old stuff. They just want to knock it down and build new stuff. So it was literally like, you go to like these fields and there's like some walls and like what looked like might have been a door. It was that. I've been doing it slowly, so chipping away at it bit by bit, saving up money. Like, I knew a new roof would cost about €30,000, so save up, do that, save up, do the next bit. So I've been doing that for about kind of 7 or 8 years now. Have you got anyone
on the ground? Have you got family or anything out there?
Yeah, I've got family who live in France, so it's in the same hamlet that my auntie lives, so she can kind of manage people.
I was like, how do you keep an eye on it and all of that? That's cool.
Yeah. So, and I've got insurance, like it's insured and stuff, so that's fine. So there's that, and then my business, obviously. So at some point, I will exit the company, and that will potentially be sale of my shares or whatever else that is, and hopefully
Mm.
the as you know, for the years when you start a business, you're paid well below market rate for what you do because you've got 5
Yeah.
jobs, so you're definitely not earning 5 salaries, and so you sacrifice at the start with the idea of kind of what that could look like in the future. But I'm very conscious that
Yeah.
I don't want that. That's the main plan. But also,
Mm.
if that doesn't work out, I'll be okay.
Yeah.
I'll still have
Yeah.
a life I love. And that was really
Mm.
important to me. I also do other things. So I do a lot of public speaking now, writing,
Mm.
which I get paid for. So I'm building
Mm.
up kind of multiple income streams, which allow me to
Mm.
kind of have options really. I hate all eggs in one basket. I'm not that kind of
Yeah.
person. I like to
Yeah.
kind of diversify. Yeah.
Mm. And tell me, so you got blood clots in your legs, just to like go into, and then there's stuff that goes wrong, and
Yeah,
it's a
stuff
nice
stuff goes wrong.
a nice
Yeah,
segue into that. Maybe not. It sounded horrific, and
it was.
I was, I
It,
know, all I know is bits and pieces that you posted on Facebook. So I don't, we haven't spoken.
Yeah, so
Um,
I was out. So with all the best laid plans. So I'm a very fit and healthy person. I've
mm.
always kind of looked after myself. I've
Weightlifting, pole dancing,
Yeah, very
to name
active,
a few, which are
hiking.
yeah.
Yeah, I've always been super active. I was a competitive power lifter for many
Mm.
years.
Mm.
So done all the things you're supposed to do. Whenever I go to
Mm.
the doctor, and they're like, "How many units of alcohol do you drink a week?" And it's always like I'm always quite smug. I'm like, "Not many," apart from the odd night in France. But it's
Yeah,
well
yeah,
within healthy,
yeah,
healthier
yeah.
than your average.
Mm.
So I was out walking the dog one day. I was 38 at the time. 38, 38, 38 at the time. I was out walking the dog and was going up a hill, and I thought I'd like torn my hamstring. So suddenly my right leg was like excruciatingly painful, and it
Mm.
went completely dead. And I was like, oh my god, like ow, that really hurt. But it felt like an injury. I've been injured before. It felt like an injury, and it took what should have been a 15-minute walk home. It took me about an hour to get home because I was like hobbling. I was like kind of
And
like,
you were on your own.
no, my husband was with me, but
He was there. Okay.
he's also an ex powerlifter. So he's like, "Oh, come on, you've had worse than this. Get home, like stop moaning." So
And
I'm
you're
like,
like,
"Oh, my leg hurts." He's like, "It's fine. We'll sort it out when you get home." Anyway, and the dog's like running around being an idiot.
mm.
Got home, and it just felt like an injury. I was like, God, I've really done something here. And then we were joking because like lifting heavy weights and doing all these dangerous things,
Mm.
and you always hurt yourself when you're like reaching for the milk, or like
Yeah.
when you crick your neck when you're not concentrating. Like you can go and lift 180 kilos, but then you hurt yourself like picking up a shoe.
Yeah.
We're like joking, like, oh, isn't it typical? Anyway, so I went to go
Mm.
and see my osteopath a couple of days later because it was still like not great. I couldn't walk very far. I was like, oh God, I've really done something here. I need to get like an ultrasound on
Mm.
it. So I went to see my osteopath, and he was, to be fair, amazing. He was like, I don't like this. He was like, your foot's cold. He was like, I think you've like really trapped something. And he said, I need you to get you to the doctor because I think you probably like, I'm worried about like you've trapped kind of an artery or something, which is a thing.
Mm.
Like you
Yeah.
still felt like an injury. Went to the doctors, and he was like, oh yeah, this is weird, and went through all the risk factors. You smoke, all that kind of stuff. And he was like, that's strange. They did like the brachial index test. They kind of take your blood pressure at like the 4 points of your body. I'm
Mm.
I find medicine fascinating. I find human bodies fascinating. So I'm like, at this point, I'm like interested in everything that's going on. I'm like, oh, this is
Mm.
interesting. Like data.
Mm.
Oh, this is quite interesting. So like measure all my stuff. Everything's great apart from my right leg. And he's like, your right leg, basically, he's like, that's the sort of reading I'd expect from a kind of 70-year-old diabetic smoker who never moves. So I was like, huh. Okay, interesting. He was like, so I'm going to send you some blood tests. I was like, am I sure? And I said to him, I'm like, should I be worried at this point? He was like, no. He was like, it'll be something. Don't worry about it. I was like, okay, great. So I went off for some blood tests, and about 3 or 4 days later, so the first kind of set of lockdowns kind of ending, I was able to go to the hairdressers. I was like, yay, you can buy haircuts. So I was literally in the hairdressers, and my phone rings, and it's my doctor. He's like, okay, yeah, you have to go to hospital now. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, you have to go to hospital immediately. I was like, okay. I was like, I'm in the hairdressers. Can I finish my haircut? He was like, no, go now. I was like, okay. And it was like, when you hairdress, I'm like, I'm not normally this traumatic. I'm really sorry. I have to leave now. Can we just like finish that bit and I'll come back and sort it out? So I'm like, I have no idea what's going on at this point. So
Wow.
so as far as my husband's concerned, I left for the hairdressers and never came back. So I like rang him. I was in the car. I'm like, I'm really sorry. I've got to go to the hospital now. And he's like, okay, well, keep me posted. At this point, no one's like that worried. And I asked the doctor, I was like, well, what's wrong? He's like, oh, your bloods were a bit off. I was like, all right. Anyway, get to hospital, get admitted, and I saw the consultant. So tell him what's going on. And he's like, look, I don't think we're looking at a blood clot here. He's like, you've got no swelling, you've got no symptoms of it. He's like, what we're probably looking at is that you've trapped something quite severely, and we need to figure out what that is, so how we untrap it. Or you've got like some kind of you can get like an infection in your arteries, and somehow that's causing some kind of reduced blood flow. Because at this point my foot was like blue. So my foot was like very cold and had gone blue. I was like, that's not looking great. Anyway, so they did a CT scan, and then he came back the next day, and he came to my bed, and he was white. And he was like, okay. He's like, well, I don't know how we've not had to amputate your foot. I was like, well, there's an opening line. I was like, great, okay, brilliant. Just like, don't sugarcoat it. And he was like, also, I don't know how you're alive. I was like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah.
Probably because how fit and healthy you are, right? That's probably what actually saved you ultimately.
Me. Thick thighs save lives, quite literally. So he described what had happened as my body had, out of absolutely nowhere, created a shower of blood clots. And he described it as a shower of blood clots in my arteries, which is super rare. Like, you normally only get blood clots in your arteries if you've been in like a kind of a serious accident, or you've had major surgery. For them to appear out of nowhere is kind of a bit like unheard, like, yeah, weird. A shower of blood clots, which then went and like landed in my legs, and the pain I'd felt was basically those blood clots like stopping all blood flow to my arteries and my and my extremities and stuff. And that's what I hurt. So like if you ever train in the gym, you go to like muscle fatigue, and your muscle just stops working because it's like run out of power. That's like what happened. So
you haven't got one blood clot, you've got loads of them.
About 17.
Fuck.
Yeah, like loads. So so and I was like, well, what do we do with him? He was like, honestly, nothing. He was like, we give you. So I had to inject myself in my stomach for 4 months with quite heavy duty blood thinners. And now I'll be on, and I've had every test under the sun, and they can find nothing wrong with me. They just don't know why this happened. It's
Dare I mention the word vaccine? Had you had it?
No.
Nothing.
No. This is pre-vaccine.
Wow.
Yeah, pre-vaccine.
It's literally, there's no like oddity that happened.
Nope.
No
nothing.
medication. No significant event.
Nope.
Wow.
Nothing. Just walking around and your blood tries to kill you. Like, it can happen. So just out of nowhere. So I've been left with my right leg's quite badly damaged. So I've got about 25% of one artery working to my right foot. So I'm on quite a lot of medication to like keep my foot attached. And I've got about 25% the artery that like, feeds your right butt cheek. So that can get quite painful. Like if I'm walking uphill or like walking a long distance can be quite hard because my leg just stops working. And I've got literally, it's like a bottleneck, and I've got to stop and wait for the blood to go back into my leg and then like start again. So that's super frustrating. But it could have been a lot worse. Like he said to me, had they landed anywhere else, like the fact they all landed in your legs, he was like, is literally a miracle. He was like, someone wants you here. He was like, because he's like, I've never seen anybody with this number of blood clots be alive. I was like, oh, cool.
Thanks, I think.
I think that's good. But yeah, he was like, had they gone to your bowel or your lung or your brain, he was like, you would have just dropped dead on the spot. That was it. I was like, fuck. Like, that's like, oof.
So they're still there?
So no, that your body, and so apparently your body kind of makes, and I didn't know this, which is fascinating. Your body makes and breaks down little clots all the time, like because you bash yourself or things happen, and your body kind of creates little teeny ones and breaks them down constantly. Like that's what our bodies do. And you think about it, like when you cut yourself, that's literally you clot, and it doesn't like go into your brain or something. Your body knows where to put it, heals the thing, and does it. But mine just went. Mine just had a complete brain fart one day and decided we're going to do it all wrong. So they they dissolve on their own. They kind of like.
So what are you left with? You're left with the damage from that happening.
Yes, they attach to the walls of the artery, and then they kind of calcify and then make scar tissue. And my arteries have now got scar tissue in them, which might break down over the years, but I'm kind of have to live. I have to kind of have to make peace with the idea that it won't. So
Wow.
kind of you are where you are. But yeah, again, this lesson, you're just walking around one day and things happen. And so this kind of, again, kind of to segue it back into the money chat, you just cannot go through life assuming that that kind of job, university, house, pension is going to work. And we all know someone who's had that story, like, oh, we saved all our money for our retirement and then one of us died 2 years later. Like, don't be that person. Like, live your retirement now. Like, do that stuff now, because you just don't know. Like, the unexpected happens. And what it really taught me is when people say stuff like, oh, that's like really rare. I'm like, hey, do you know what? Rare stuff happens all the time to somebody.
All the time.
All the time. Rare things happen constantly. Like, yeah. This is
there's
like
so many rare things that there's always a
rare thing happening.
Brilliant.
So I still enjoy, perversely, I still quite enjoy the look of horror on any medical professional's face when they see what happened to me. Because when I was in hospital, they came to me with like my medical notes, and they're like, "You haven't got any medical notes." I'm like, "I've never been ill. I've literally never been ill." And they were like, "Oh right." I'm like, "I've never been in hospital. I broke my finger once. I've never broken a bone, really." Like, I was like, I've never been ill. And they're like, "Oh my god!" Like, they had like one page of like a few bullet points. Like, that was it. So yeah, just it just, you've got to go through life kind of not assuming something terrible happened, but really cognizant of the fact that something horrible could happen at any moment. And if it did, and that's kind of quite life affirming, actually, being that I didn't die. It also makes you think, like, if you've got stuff in your house, like, things you don't want maybe parents to see, have a friend who, like, have an agreement, like, if you did die, they clear out certain drawers, like, just have that little agreement.
Yes, I've never thought of that before.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my god, what if they found, like, oh, so, like, have a, just make sure you've got someone, like, a bit like, Mission Impossible, that if that happens,
It's
they get
kind of like the friend that helps you bury the body, but
empty the toy drawer.
Empty the drawers and stuff.
Yeah, just make sure you've got someone in your life who'll do that for you. But no, like, you could just walk around and yeah, but it's quite life affirming, because after all that, and I wrote a piece about it, that I had the perfect excuse. And like, you go through that kind of I still would be dramatic and call it a near-death experience, but you go through that kind of trauma. Yeah, you go through that trauma. Like, it's a close call. I was lucky, like, simultaneously very unlucky and also very lucky at the same time. And I still came out of that loving what I do, and I was like, I wouldn't have changed anything. Like, I wouldn't have lived my life differently. And I was like, that's kind of
not
like,
many people can say that.
and I was like, that's for me, that was it. I was like, I still massively believe in what I do for the business, and I'm like even more motivated to do certain things with it. I still love my life, my husband, my hobbies, like all my choices. Like, I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty happy with all those choices. There was nothing I was like, right, that's it, I'm completely changing, I'm going off to live on a remote island somewhere. I was like, no, actually, yeah, crack on. Like, this is, I'm on the right path. And that was quite a big thing, actually. I think that you don't often get gifted those moments to kind of properly go, is it now? Do I do the thing? Is this the big change? So I go and, like, I know, try and make it in LA or whatever. I don't know. No is the answer to that. I haven't even got TikTok going. I can't do an audition tape. So yeah, but yeah, that was what happened just over a year ago. So it happened on the 1st of April. 1st of April 2020.
That is not funny, April Fools.
It's not funny, is it? So the 1st of April came round, and I walked past the place it happened, because I know exactly the spot it happened. And I walked past it a lot. I'm like, that could have been the. And also, you kind of look at it, and I find it quite funny. Like, oh, that could be the place I died. Like, that could have been like.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I was like, you could have died there.
And literally, that could have been the spot I died. It's just like in a park in Swansea. I'm like, oh, it's not very diva-ish, is it? It's like, that's a bit
found in park.
Woman found in park, like that. I'd be like an "and finally" on the news, like, "and finally," like, cat slip up tree and woman found in park. Yeah, like, yeah, but it was it can happen. Rare things happen all the time, and we go through life. And I suppose you can't go through life thinking of all the things that could go wrong. I mean, that's literally what anxiety is. Like, go through life. That's literally anxiety. And I have that. And actually, it was amazing for my anxiety, because all the things that my anxiety told me might happen never thought of this, did it? Didn't bloody
No.
think of this. Rubbish.
Yeah.
Liar. Complete liar. Anxiety is a complete liar. And the things that you should be worried about never tells you about. So yeah, now if I get kind of anxious and I kind of spiral a bit, I'm like, well, never predicted that, did it? So it's probably lying to me. And that's actually been really freeing as well. Because it's sort of,
That's
yeah.
massive.
Yeah, it's kind of this strange. I still suffer with anxiety. Everybody does, but it's very much kind of like, well, the one thing that it should have really been anxious about, dying whilst walking the dog, just didn't happen. So
Just wasn't there.
never thought of
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So yeah, I suppose you can't walk through life thinking about what all the things that could go wrong, because you'd be paralyzed. You'd never do anything. But actually, I suppose there by the grace of God or whatever.
Yeah.
Deity, insert your own deity. There by the grace of whatever, chance, fate,
Yeah.
because anything can happen. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, just over a year ago. Spent a lot of time in hospitals, like not fun, like just a lot of appointments. Also, it's really inconvenient being ill. Like when you're a busy person.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Like you were just saying about 6 weeks to get an appointment. It's like fitting it in. I mean,
Massively
we haven't
inconvenient.
managed to all meet for brunch for years.
Yeah.
COVID aside, even before that, we weren't managing to like figure it out. So having to do
just so inconvenient, And I thought you said go along with my laptop because I'd be there for hours, and I'd be like, "Can I have the staff Wi-Fi password?" They're like, "No." I was like, "Oh, come on, I've got work to do." And then one time, because of course, what happened to me, it doesn't really happen to young people. I still class myself as young, so like, and you realize you're young when you're in a room with like everyone else there's like 90. And I'm in this room and they're all kind of like older, and I'm there on my little laptop. And I remember having a conversation with a nurse. I was like, look, I know like everything runs late. I was like, but can I please, like, is there any, I've got stuff to do. When's my appointment going to be? And she's like, well, yeah. She's like, well, you're all in the same boat. And I'm sort of looking around going, I don't think that's true. I'm pretty certain. I mean, I could be completely misreading the room. I'm pretty certain none of these people have got a board meeting later. I'm going to throw it out there. Don't think any of these have got a tech meeting or a board meeting at 2:00. Like I think they wouldn't mind me hopping ahead of them. But yeah, it was funny. You gotta laugh.
You have to, right?
You gotta laugh.
Otherwise, you could just go nuts.
You would, yeah. You would.
Yeah. So, do you still have lots of appointments and medication and stuff, or is it just you monitor?
I'm on a lot of medication. And I will be forever, which it is what it is. It's better than it happening again. And the problem is they didn't find anything wrong with me. So because they've not found anything wrong with me, they can't go, that's what caused it. We can treat that thing. They just don't know why it happened. And it could be that it's happened for a reason that medicine doesn't know yet. So I have to stay on anticoagulants and vasodilators forever. The vasodilators are just to keep blood flow like going into my foot, and the anticoagulants are to stop my blood clotting. So bleeding to death is something I have to worry about now instead of like clotting to death.
Ironically, yeah.
I know, yeah. Just like pick a lane, guys. Come on. But yeah, so I have to be a bit careful about stuff like that. Yeah, so I'll be on that, and I've got and then just dealing with the after effect of it, like, is my leg gonna ever improve? And I do get things like overnight, like it aches, like it's like achy, like an old person. It's like my leg aches in the evening, so that's kind of not that fun. But yeah, I'm still under a consultant, so I have checkups with them, and I think I probably will do for a few years now, just to kind of monitor it. And again, because I'm a bit of an anomaly, they're all a bit like, we need to kind of use you as a case study because this doesn't happen to people your age, so it's a bit of a strange one. And it wasn't like related to like hormonal birth control or anything, because that tends to be like DVTs, that's in your veins. And they even did tests for like, well, did it start in your vein and go all the way around your body, somehow go through your heart and out the other side? And they did all these tests and it wasn't that. So yeah, they've really looked for everything. I've had every weird and wonderful test under the sun, and I'm surprised that everything works. Like everything's good. Like apart from the random blood trying to kill me one day. But we all have bad days. Like just having a bad day.
You just had a particularly bad day.
Particularly bad day.
But it's kind of like really unlucky, but also very lucky at the same time.
But you sort of think as well, like you think about how those moments are portrayed, kind of, I suppose. And I suppose even me telling the story sounds quite dramatic, but when you're in it, it's just happening to you. Like it's just kind of, I don't know whether that's your brain sort of protecting you a bit, but you're just living it, and it's each one moment at a time. And then you always said about, you look back at like something was hard, you don't realize it was hard until you look back and go, oh, that was really hard.
Until you're out of it, yeah.
that.
Yeah.
You look back and you go,
Mm.
oh, that was a really shit time. But at the time, everybody is so much more resilient than you think you are. Like, your ability to get through stuff is so much greater than you think it's going to be. Because when something bad happens, you just handle it. Like, you probably won't fall to pieces. You'll probably cope somehow. And that's quite amazing, really. Like, we're all a lot more resilient than I think we are.
Yeah, definitely. And I there's something as well about our resilience doesn't get tested.
Yeah.
In this day and age per se.
Yeah.
I mean, insert, Russia and the war on Ukraine's a bit of a big test for everyone, and is that coming our way? But those kinds of tests, apart from that, don't really come along. We don't have levels of violence come at us from nowhere. We don't have, I know everyone says at the moment there's a lot of financial hardship. And at the same time, I'm like, this isn't really that bad. And I get, look, people will say, oh, well, it's all right for you with your property portfolio and your business and this, that, and the other. And sure, I get that. It's not that bad for me. And I was born in Zimbabwe. I've been back to Africa. My dad lived in Tanzania. I know what real poor looks like. And I'm like, this isn't, even the poorest poor people in our country, most Tanzanians, anyone in a third world country would give up a lot to have that.
Yeah.
It's a funny perspective of hardship, and
it's all relative though, isn't it? Like everything, it's all relative. And it's that kind of and I suppose that's why we have global indexes and country by country indexes, because if you look at kind of so very thankful for the NHS over the last year, because I found out recently that just the tablets I have to take are like £60 a box. And the injections that I was on for 4 months were £15 an injection. I had to take one every day. If I was in the USA and I was poor and I didn't have health insurance, medical bankruptcy is the number one bankruptcy in the USA. So you look at kind of standard of living, and there by the grace of God and all that kind of stuff. And if a hardship happened to you and suddenly you lost your job and you lost your healthcare and then you got ill, you're screwed.
Ironically, the chances of getting ill are higher once you've lost your job and your house, right? As well,
because you've got stress and all that other stuff that can really contributes. So I suppose it's all relative in that sense. Like, I'm super privileged that I've grown up in the UK, that I had no other underlying health conditions. Also, that I'm a healthy, or what the medical community considered not to be particularly overweight. So I didn't suffer any kind of discrimination because of how my body looks. So people who live in a bigger body quite often suffer medical discrimination, because it's assumed that all their problems are based around the size of their body instead of what's actually happening inside their body. So I didn't face any of that. So I was able to access. I'm also they're very lucky that I was in hospital for 3 days, and during that time, no one told me what's going on, and I was able to advocate for myself, and I'm a very articulate person. So if I had a learning difficulty or was vulnerable, that experience would have been incredibly different, and
or
that would have
just
been
not that articulate, or not that confident. I'm kind of blessed with the same. I don't mind looking stupid, and I don't mind asking questions and going, sorry, what is that? And hang on, I went through 2 pregnancies as a geriatric mum.
Oh God, don't even.
I was like,
the medical, and they go like, oh, that's the medical name for it. Like, pick a different word.
Yeah, let's change it. So geriatric mum wanted home births, didn't want medical intervention, went overdue, and that is unacceptable to the medical
they don't
profession.
Like that.
Don't you dare let your body do what it does and give birth when it's ready. Like, you must. And I've sat with a consultant who basically told me I was probably going to kill my baby if I didn't get induced there and then, like, literally. And it's only because I'm articulate and can go, and even in that point, I was crying. I was so upset. And
so
luckily, Owen is amazing, and was just like, no, we're not being induced. We've come in to have a scan to check everything's okay, so we can go home again. Not so you can say, cover your medical negligence flipping insurance by saying, well, we told you should have in case the baby dies. But people who can't stand up for that, that's not easy to do. And the same with you, right? Like, and most people see a doctor and go, well, you know everything. You're in charge. You tell me what to do.
And I was a mess. Like, I was in hospital, bearing in mind that I'd been plucked from my life
Yeah.
and plonked in a hospital, and
Mm.
you have to, and I'm a very impatient person. You've got to wait around for everything. And it's a surprise to no one. So I'm like, what's the ETA on this scan? And they're like, well, it's going to happen when it happens. I'm like, that's unacceptable to me.
That's
When is it going to be?
unacceptable from the
It's
business world. It's
unacceptable.
just like,
Absolutely
that's
not.
why the NHS is in such a mess.
Tell me when it's going to be. And they'll call if emergencies come in. I'm like, I know, but just frustrating. And but also then experiencing the other side of it, which is the invisible illness side of it, is quite an interesting road to walk. So I have times where I can't walk very far, and I have to stop. I just can't walk, and
Mhm.
that's really interesting. And when I was going back for appointments, and I was saying, look, so when I went back after it happened, I went in, and they hadn't told me that I had to have another scan, and I was like, I thought this was literally, my appointment was 8:30. It's
Yeah.
now 10:30. Nothing's happened. You didn't tell me it's because I was waiting for a scan. Like, I can't do this now. I've got stuff to do.
Yeah.
Um, and having some nurses be very rude to me, and I was like, look, I just need to know when this is going to be. And one of them actually snapped at me. Was like, I've got actual ill people to deal with, and I was like,
Wow.
okay. And then it was actually that scan when I saw the consultant, and she saw me afterwards, like, oh, so you've had your scan now? I'm like, yeah, I nearly died. And her face was like, I was like, yeah. And she's like, oh my
Yeah.
God. Oh my God. I'm like, yeah, so maybe just because I'm walking around and I look okay, and it's a big lesson. You
Yeah.
just don't know, do you? Like,
What people are dealing with.
you don't know what people are
Mm.
dealing with. And I always
Mm.
try and, I suppose it's maybe a little bit kind of softer, I suppose, in some ways to people, because if someone's like rude or having a bad day, I'm like,
Mm.
I kind of have to think about, like, I don't know what their weeks look like, what they're handling at home,
Yeah.
what else is going on in their lives, what they're
Yeah.
going to bed at night worried about.
Yeah.
But also if people tell me that they're experiencing something, and something's, or the way they see the world they're experiencing, I just believe them, because I go, do you know what?
Yeah.
Actually, I was saying that to people, and because I didn't look a certain way, they didn't believe me. And
Yeah.
so actually, same with you, because you were a certain age, because you happen to have been. Bear in mind, we've made up time. We've made up
Yeah.
age. We just made it up.
Yeah.
A very,
Literally.
and again, a very useful way to label people. It's a really easy way to apply a set of rules to a set of people.
Mm.
Age is a completely useless number, because it doesn't tell you, like, you're 30% of the way through your life, or
Yeah.
you're at your body's performing as X percentage.
Yeah.
It's completely useless, really, apart from
Yeah.
very general, broad guidelines.
Exactly. And it's like, oh, you're a geriatric mum, so you have to be consultant led, and you have to do this and this. And I'm like, the very first midwife who saw me, she didn't even realize how old I was until I specifically said to her, by the way, I'm not happy with consultant led. I want a home
Yeah,
birth with midwives. And she was like, looking at the notes, looking at me, going, why? How old are you?
yeah, useless,
I was
useless
like,
number, pointless.
it's pointless, because I think I look younger now than I did when I was 25,
Yeah,
because I don't smoke anymore, I don't drink anymore, I don't eat
you're not working in a kitchen
flipping
anymore.
Mars bars, I don't work 16 hours a
Yeah,
day anymore. I look after myself, I work out, I'm stronger than I've ever
yeah.
been. And so it's just arbitrary, isn't it? It's like, how
It,
old are you? It's like, well, what's that mean? It's
well,
like, that's
yeah,
how many years you've been on the planet. That's about
yeah.
all it tells you.
Literally, it just tells you how many times we've been on the planet, in a time which we also made up. Like, if I lived on
Yeah,
Mars, I'd be a different age. Like, it's stupid. I'd also be
yeah,
dead, but um, but
yeah,
I can't live
yeah.
on Mars just yet. But yeah, and I think that it's maybe kind of and with all things, well, like, when people tell me their lived experience, I'm just like, yeah, fine, that is your lived experience, and that's it. So when we go,
Because it is true for
because it
them,
is
yeah.
true for them,
Mm,
absolutely, and we don't know what we don't know, and I
mm.
do kind of so what's quite interesting is that kind of so I went down, so after this, then I had to make sure that I wasn't on any. So the other thing that happened off the back of this is I without knowing it, and I didn't sign up for this, but I've become the uterus spokesperson for the UK.
I
So
have noticed on social media that was quite a thing.
yeah,
It's like,
I've become the
go you.
spokesperson for
Yeah.
uteri. Is that the plural for across the UK? So I had to have an IUD fitted, which is a form of birth control.
Mm,
Horrifically painful, horrible experience,
mm.
and I'm a massive oversharer, obviously. So I wrote about this on Facebook, and then a bunch of other people started going, "Oh my god, yeah, I had this happen.
Yeah.
Terrible, 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 horrible, really painful, absolutely." I was like, "Hang on a second,
Mm.
this isn't."
It's
I was
not
like,
okay.
I was like, I know I can live in an echo chamber, like, politically and socially, but pain-wise, probably not an echo chamber on social media. So you know how I love
Mm.
data. I was like,
Yeah.
before I start kicking off, I'm going to gather some data. So I did a little
Mm,
survey, sent it out into
mm,
the world. Anyway, that just blew up. Like 1,500 people filled this survey. I was like, whoa. And the response was just people going, I had this happen to me. I had that happen to me. It was terrible, awful experience, all this sort of stuff. And I was like, well, okay, well, what does the actual NHS say about this procedure? And I read it, and it was like, said like mild discomfort. And I was like, no, that's a lie.
What I'm reading here is not mild discomfort.
That is not what the data says. So I then, anyway, long story short, end up on like BBC Breakfast with it, and I'm now actually working. There's never been a proper pain study done into this stuff. So all the stuff we know about cervixes, we don't basically. We don't know anything about a cervix, and we don't know anything about female pain, which is probably why things like when you were pregnant, they just don't know all this stuff. There's no data.
Well, we looked into, because I was so, I'm very like, medication is flipping epic if your life needs saving.
Yeah.
Outside
If you need it, great. Yeah.
Not so helpful.
Yeah.
And we looked into, and we were with the midwife they were just amazing. They're very different to the doctors. It's black and white. It's so different. And we looked into where this thing came from of you're going to kill your baby if you go overdue.
Yeah.
And it was a study. I can't, anyone who's listening who knows the answer, I'm not getting this right now, but it was something like a study from the 1970s of like 12 women, and 12 gave birth at home, 12 gave birth in the hospital overdue, and one extra woman, there was one extra stillbirth from the home birth. Wasn't necessarily because it was overdue, but all these women happened to be overdue, at which point they then said, right, going overdue is unsafe.
Yeah.
And now we can't even get the data about whether that's true, because nobody's allowed to go overdue unless they're like me and go, fuck off, I'm staying at home. Like, you can't make me go.
And what's interesting is the idea of overdue is different in different countries. In France, it's 42 weeks.
And that's what we were saying. We were like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
What you're saying to us is ridiculous, and there's no study to back up what you're saying. And they're like, but this and this and this. It's like, you're literally talking nonsense, and you're trying to scare me into your way of doing it.
And it blows my mind that in some areas we have so much research, and we have, and let's face it, it's the areas where they can make money because someone will sponsor that research. But IUDs have looked the same since they were invented in about the 40s, and we don't know anything about cervical pain. We don't know anything about what they call fundal pain, so like pain at the top of the uterus and all. I know a lot of medical things now. I've never said the word cervix so much in my life, like it's crazy. So I went on to campaign, and actually real change happened. So, and this again goes to show that I shouldn't have had to. It shouldn't have had to be me that did this and just somehow hit the zeitgeist at the right time.
And also, why not? It's like, if someone doesn't do it, there's a brilliant poem that one of my business coaches quotes, and it's I can't remember the whole poem, but it's basically like, well, if we don't do it, who does? It's like, yes, you shouldn't have had to do it, and at the same time, if you don't, no one will, because no one should.
Who's gonna do that change? So but now real change happening. So the Faculty of Sexual and Reproductive Health have updated their guidelines. The NHS have changed their website. They're now looking into different training, and part of helping write an actual proper pain study, because a proper medical pain study, we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in this, not just like 12. There's never been one done. There's never been one done about this stuff. So actually helping to write contribute to a pain study, so we have all this data, so that my friends' kids don't have to go through this. And I was like, that's it. Like, I don't want the next generation to still have to deal with this rubbish. On the whole, women giving birth later thing, I have so many friends now who are like over 40 having their first child. And touch wood, I don't know any of them who've had any problems, and I know that's a very small data set. I was thinking about this, and I was looking at, like, again, love a bit of data, looking at like birth rates and stuff like that. And obviously pre-contraception, women gave birth in their 40s because you're still ovulating and you've not hit menopause yet. You still have sex, and that's what happens when you have unprotected sex, kids. You end up having babies, and and it happened. People had more kids back then. And I was doing my family history tree, and I was looking at the number of children people had. Obviously, it was like loads of them, and the age at which people had these children, and you start having kids in your 20s when you got married, and you carry on into your 40s, and that was really normal. And then we understood more about it and started telling women, oh no, you're like, once you hit 35, it's over. You're basically all going to die if you give birth now. You're horrible, irresponsible people.
How dare you get pregnant at such an age?
You have sex, revolting, you old haggard witches. How dare you? Just disgusting. And now obviously women, life takes a different route. So we want full lives before and after children, and we want to live and have careers and all this kind of stuff. And there's a part of me that goes, do you know what? If women want to do that, we just have to make medicine catch up. We just have to make medicine catch up with things. Oh, her husband's appeared behind me. Is he
Hello,
off?
Adam.
With a dog? Is she? Oh, he's going to have to bath the dog now. She's stinking dirty.
Have you got a spaniel again? Because you had. I remember your original spaniel that passed away.
The OG.
So you've got another one.
Yeah. Another spaniel called Bronwyn, who's young and very buggery. But yeah, he's got her under his arm like that, like carrying her for. She'll be fuming now. She'll be absolutely livid. But yeah, if women want to have kids later, we just have to make medicine work. People want to live longer. We let them live longer by medical intervention. Just figure it out, medicine. Just figure it all out.
In some ways, what's interesting around giving birth is it's actually can we please have less intervention? Can you leave women alone to do what bodies have done for years? And look, I was very grateful. Yeah, I was very grateful that we are 6 minutes away from a big hospital.
Yeah.
If shit went wrong,
we'd
have our best chance of surviving.
Yeah.
But also the thing that the midwife said to me that was really interesting, and I went on a hypnobirthing course as well, was that usually actually when things go wrong in birth, it's coming and it happens quite slowly, whereas the films have us it's like it all goes wrong immediately, and if you're not in a hospital, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
And the midwife was like, that's not how it happens.
Yeah.
We know. It's like friends of, I don't know if you know Kevin Birch, so they've just had a baby.
Name rings a bell.
Parenting coach. He's kind of been we've probably crossed each other's paths because of me, and they've just had a baby. It's same thing. Kev's in his 50s. I'm not sure how old Debra is, probably 40s. And that she's a GP, right? So she's in the profession, and she was still getting this, you got to do it this way. And it's like, look, if it goes wrong, amazing. But if not, can you she had preeclampsia, that was it. So she had to go into hospital, stay in hospital so they could monitor. So she didn't die. Yeah. Brilliant.
Fair enough.
Into that.
Yeah.
So actually, the chance of it going wrong was monitored over weeks.
Yeah.
It wasn't like in a minute.
No.
Oh,
yeah.
And yes, there was some emergency stuff towards the end, but it actually takes time for stuff to go wrong.
It does, and that's where the benefit of medical, I suppose, history and the data people have collected and all that kind of stuff really comes into play. Is we know what's going wrong looks like, so that's really important. But if we know what going wrong looks like, I also got thinking about how big. So we talk about the dangers of birth over the age of 40 or whatever else, and all this and the other. I was like, well, actually, how big is that data pool? Because presumably we have a lot more data pool of people between the age of say 20 and 35 than we do, because for generations we've been telling women not to give birth over 35, or all your eggs will suddenly turn to dust or whatever. Like your uterus falls out and runs away. I don't know. Oh gosh.
That shit's real though, man. Like that's societal, and there's no way of pinpointing the one time when someone said it. It's like it's everywhere, and
we absorb it
without realizing.
And it's culturally, and it's the stuff that drives me mad. So it's stuff like you said, in films, everything goes wrong really quickly. It doesn't happen. It's not like that. It's not always like that in real life. It's usually not like that in real life. Or in films, whenever anybody who's not kind of under 30 or is over 35 gives birth, there's always a drama around it. There's always a complication. Oh, how dare she? Oh, how irresponsible. And I just love to see, there's things I'd love to see in terms of the portrayal of, especially I think women in the media, because I think we kind of absorb all this stuff. And there, obviously, men absorb a load of other stuff as well, but obviously I'm speaking as my lived experience as a woman. We absorb all this stuff. We absorb all the stuff about our fertility. We absorb all the stuff about our roles, and we absorb all this stuff around what sexy looks like at a certain age. And I just want to see normal shaped, normal looking women having a ball. Like, that's what I want to see. That's what I was always see represented everywhere. And I'm so glad that the kind of body neutrality movement is happening, because we're moving very slowly, but we're moving away from this space where beauty only looks like one thing, or being pregnant only looks like one thing, or running a business only looks like one thing. And we're sort of moving into this space, and going full circle, that's where TikTok and things like that are amazing, because you've got the ability to represent that group and find that tribe of those people who also, and that's why I think those kind of platforms are amazing, because if you're a mid-sized person, you can go and look at a bunch of people wearing clothes who are similar body shape to you and go, that looks great on them, I'm going to try that. Instead of, I remember there was an outcry, I say an outcry, probably at certain red tops or whatever, when a fitness shop used models of bodies, like mannequins of bodies, and I've never met anyone who has a body that looks like a mannequin ever in my whole life. So we're really like the bars here anyway, innit? So I've never met.
And then you add in Instagram and filters and Photoshop. You're fucked.
They use a mannequin body of a woman that was a normal size. She's probably like a size 14, 16 or whatever, with clothes on it. Ugh, it's promoting obesity. I'm like, oh, get a grip. Two things here. No, it's not. That's it. You're wrong. Secondly, we constantly, as a society, tell people in larger bodies to eat less and move more. And yet we don't represent the clothes they can wear to move more anywhere. Are they not allowed to wear nice gym clothes until they're the size of a mannequin? Like, what a mixed message. So first of all, I think that your body doesn't have to be any particular size to be healthy. And in fact, I learned that over this last year, because some of the medication that I was on made me put on weight, and I hadn't changed anything else, but the medication just like made me gain about 10 kilos in 8 weeks. I was like, I didn't do this. This wasn't anything I did. And suddenly I was in a body that was bigger than it had been before. And I had to like walk around
deal with it.
dealing with that, and feeling that kind of like, feeling like, were people judging me because my body looked different to how it suddenly, and that kind of very tabloidy, like, she's put on weight. What's going on? And leave me alone. Leave my body alone. Just generally, just leave our bodies alone. Just let us live in them, be happy, and just stop messing around with them. Unless we ask
it goes back to expectations, doesn't it? It's like there's how we expect life should be, how we expect bodies should be, how we expect birth should be, and then there's actually how it is. And then there's all of the other ways in between. Like, I was 40. I just turned 40. I'd had my birthday. I'd had my 40th birthday when I gave birth. And same, actually, I just had my 38th birthday when I gave birth. And there's how lots of 40-year-olds are. Then there was how I was. And it
did they, out of interest, so you were 38 with your first and 40 with your second. Did you notice a difference in having that 40 number in front? Was that a different? Were you treated any different because that 40? Was it because you were like over 35 and still geriatric?
So I wasn't, and I think the other thing was because there's a thing around when you're pregnant the first time, and that's not not discounting like if people have had miscarriage and all a pregnancy, a successful pregnancy, first pregnancy. You are treated like you don't know what the fuck you're doing. You're an idiot. You can't possibly know what your body's doing. So you're kind of mollycoddled more. But not in a helpful way, just in a kind of like you're an idiot.
Intrusive,
way.
Like condescending way.
Yeah, kind of like that. And that's even, I really only dealt with midwives in the main, and most of them were amazing. But there was still this undercurrent of like, you don't really know what you're doing. Actually, I'm pretty smart and articulate, and I read a shitload. I didn't really like school, but when I'm interested in something, I'll devour videos, books, you name it. So I was like, actually, I know quite a lot of stuff. The second one, you kind of get more left alone because you've done it before. And also, I don't know what my medical notes say, but if they've got codes for patients that are non-compliant, it's probably all over my notes of like, she won't listen. She wouldn't get infused. Won't follow advice, if they've got codes for that, it's probably all over my notes. I should probably ask for my notes back. In fact, it was interesting, they take all your notes off you, so you get given, it's archaic as well, you get given this literal folder of paper and told, and this is in 2020, 2022, this is not like 2018, this is not 20 years ago. You get told if you lose those notes, that's the only copy there is, and that'll be a real problem.
How is that possible?
And they're literally filling out notes on the paper and then doing a copy for them. And it's all you have. And they basically say to you, you should probably keep this book with you all the time in case something happens and you have to go into hospital.
So this blows my mind. Like, we walk around with these things constantly that like can do everything.
Yeah.
And I also have this thing as well, which even if you like writing, is a little remarkable thing. I write notes in here, and it sinks into my
one too.
It sinks into my phone, and I can carry it around. How is that cost like 500 quid? Like, how are we? Oh,
yeah.
Baffling.
So it's kind of so it's kind of weird. So by the second one, I was already known as non-compliant. I was really lucky that the midwife.
You had a reputation.
I'm sure I had a reputation. In fact, Sue was like, "You're really on the second one." Sue, the midwife that came, she was the third round of midwives on the first one because shift changes. So I had like 6 or 7 midwives. It's quite luxurious when you have a home birth because you have two dedicated midwives the whole time. And then shift changes. So sometimes there's 3 or 4 in the house. Whereas when you're in hospital, there's like a couple who are trying to manage
floating around.
So Sue, who had been that one, she does reflexology and massage and all sorts of other stuff. So I then started seeing her for all of that and still do, and requested her for the second birth. She's not even in my area, but because of COVID and they were short-staffed, she was allowed.
Oh,
and
that's
she
awesome.
I'm pretty good at advocating for myself, but she advocated for me on a level. She was just like, look, she knows what she's doing. She's fit and healthy. She's got had no underlying health issue. There's nothing. There's not a bit like you before you went with your blood clots. Like, there's nothing. I don't have a medical file. There's nothing. I don't go to the bloody doctors. So she advocated really well with me. So they kind of left me alone more. But she said, like, the hospital are losing their shit over you, basically. She didn't swear because she's very polite. But she was basically like, with Rupert, I'd gone overdue, which I don't believe is even overdue. But, they give you a due date.
Yeah.
Other things will say take 2 weeks from that. And after you're the 2 weeks, then you're overdue. So, and that's the way I view being overdue. It's like, so the hospital are going, you're 5 days overdue, 6 days overdue, 7. And I'm going, no, haven't reached my due date yet. So at 14 days overdue to the hospital, they are literally like,
they're losing it.
Oh my God. They can't cope. They're like, we're going to end up in court if this goes wrong. She's not listening. All of that. I can't remember how many days overdue I was in.
But you know you're allowed to. So I was like reading this stuff about, because when I got stuck in hospital and I was like, I'm going to discharge myself, and they just lost their minds. I was like, I'm going home. Like, no, you're not. And I was like, well, you haven't told me why I'm here, and no one's.
I'm not under arrest.
I've sat around doing nothing. I'm wasting someone else's bed. And but I was like, obviously reading up about it, and you're allowed to make decisions for yourself medically, even if it results in harm or injury yourself. You're allowed to make those decisions. You are allowed to say, I do not want this thing. Like, no matter how much pressure they put on you, you can say no.
Best thing that I got out of the Catherine Graves course that I did, it was an online one. She's like the original hypnobirthing lady. So it was her online course. The best thing that I got from that was, you're allowed to say no thank you to any medical treatment you offer, and you have to give no reason. Basically what you've just said. And that for me was revolutionary, because actually it was like, they can't make you do anything, but the way they speak is like they can. And this is a great life lesson for people as well, right? Because people go around thinking, I have to do this.
No, you don't.
And I'm the first person to go, why? Do you? Who's going to make you? Are you going to get arrested? Is it illegal? Most of the time it's
Is it hurting anybody? No.
Right? And they cannot, you can refute exactly that. You can basically say, no, we need to injure, and they would use language like this. They go, we need to book you in for an induction. And I went,
no, you don't.
I'm not having one. And they're like, no, we really, because, and this is the line they use, the hospital's really busy, and if we don't schedule you in, it could be difficult.
I feel like admin is not really something that you need to concern yourself with when you're having a child.
So, and the other thing that older mothers are told, it's probably better that you have a cesarean.
Oh, sure. For who? Better for who?
For you. It's better for you, is it? Okay.
Yeah. For who? And like, again, if that's your choice, more power to you. But you should absolutely be allowed to make the choice. Informed consent. You should be able to choose without judgment.
Yeah. And I think the best life lesson, I think, and for people listening to this as well, it's like, you're allowed to say no anywhere and everywhere you like.
Yeah.
And this idea, there's a whole world of like, and this is one of my favorite subjects, right? there's a whole world of like, someone made me do it. It's like, no, the minute you get no one can make you do anything, you've got all the power.
Yeah.
The minute you think someone can make you do anything,
Yeah.
game over, because you'll just go,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Like in the hospital,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I'll be induced. It's like, I don't want to be induced.
You could, and I think this is again, as a species, we do tend to, and I get it, like we learn from people who've gone before us, and if someone's eaten that, you know, we're out in a tribe and someone's eaten that berry and they died, let's maybe not all eat that berry. But you can go and choose to eat that berry if you want to. Knowing the consequence of it, you can still go and choose to do that. You're allowed to go and do that. It might be absolutely idiotic to go and do it, but you can definitely choose to go and do that. You are allowed to go and do that. But I think that it's kind of, we go down into minutiae, don't I? So like, you can't say that, or you can't wear that to this thing, or you can't talk about this, or you can't, you know, or you can't run your business, or you can't change accountancy, or you can't, you know, buy your first property is one you're not going to live in. That's you know, why, oh, I can't believe the first property you're buying and you're not going to live in it. Well, them's the choices. Like that's what's left to me, so that's my choice. And I think that, yeah, you're absolutely right. We're not taught. So we're not taught about, we're taught kind of about like consent in kind of other areas, but we're not talking about consenting in just life generally. You don't have to do anything. You can choose, in choosing not to do something, or in choosing to say no to something, there may or may not be consequences later down the line. You can choose to accept those consequences. It's like the whole free speech debate. I absolutely, obviously, I believe in free speech. You can say what you want. Doesn't mean there's going to be no consequences for it, but say what you want. You can absolutely. I'm not going to stop you saying anything, but I also don't have to agree with it, and it also doesn't mean there aren't consequences, because it might be illegal or whatever else. But you can say no to stuff. You can absolutely decide to say no.
Yeah, and this idea, I mean, this is God, the free speech debate. There's another big one of mine.
Huge debate.
The fact that more people aren't petrified of deplatforming and censoring and all of that, and they're like, oh yeah, but you know, I like following people like Katie Hopkins, who most people find absolutely offensive and horrific, and it's like, yeah, and actually the consequences of the way she is people don't take her seriously.
Yeah.
But deplatforming her is like, that's dangerous. And she's one that, you know, most people could easily agree to deplatform, right? Because of the way she because of the way she speaks, she's easy to go, she needs to be deplatformed, she shouldn't be allowed. But Jesus, if we can't, that is basically saying people can't think for themselves. They can't hear her speak, for example. And actually, if you watch longer form stuff of when she does speak, she's spoken in there's an Oxford debate where she's actually talking about platforming and deplatforming. Fascinating, eloquent, brilliant to listen to. So I think she does herself a huge disservice when she's being, you know, sort of challenging on purpose, because it's like really, she loses audience because of it.
So the deplatforming is really interesting. I think the bigger question around there is that all the platforms we have are private companies. So and they pick the rules, and absolutely you should do, because I run my own private company, and if someone told me I wasn't allowed, I have certain regulatory stuff I have to do and certain governmental things I have to do, but if someone told me I wasn't allowed to run my business in the way I chose to run my business, I'd be furious. So all the platforms we have are private companies, and they can choose who to put on and not. So I think it's very interesting that we have our outlets for speech are actually already controlled by other people. So we've already, if you want to go on a certain platform, you go by their rules. And I do think that whilst there are certain things which I think are completely intolerable, so like hate speech and stuff like that, people need to that's because that's I do think that the promotion of that is helpful for anybody. But in terms of having opinions I don't agree with, I don't want to live in an echo chamber. I don't only want to hear opinions that align with my views, because if I do that, I'm gonna have a hell of a shock when I go out into the world and I hear people who don't agree with me. And and I need to learn how to. I think we've also lost this ability to have meaningful relationships with people we don't agree with everything on. Like you can have differing opinions but still have commonality. And there are some things which are would be complete deal breakers for me, in the same way that when you date somebody there are things that are going to be deal breakers for you. That doesn't mean that you didn't enjoy spending time with them or whatever else, but those things so in the same way with people having opinions or people having beliefs about things, like I'm not a religious person, but if somebody is a religious person and they have their sets of beliefs, that's fine. I don't have to believe in it, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to talk to them because of it.
Like, no, go away from me.
Yeah, you have a completely different set of beliefs. Like, that's cool. You do you. That's fine, as long as it's respectful and you're not being. You know what? Just don't be mean. It's being mean, isn't it? Don't be mean to people unnecessarily. Like, I think that's it. And don't punch down. That's that's one of my things, is don't punch down. Know where the balance of powers are, and don't punch down. Like, that's not cool. And I think that we can kind of I think there's a general agreement that punching down, kind of, let's not pick on somebody who's kind of already having a rough time of it. But yeah, it's, I mean, God, deplatforming freedom of speech, huge debate, like massive. This could be for like forever. And again, we talk about freedom of speech, but it used to be, we talk about it in the press. So journalists obviously have to have their right to investigate and their right to kind of report things, and they kind of have a journalistic duty, which I find fascinating, to kind of hunt for the truth. I've watched a few kind of documentaries and stuff about journalists kind of writing big stories, and you read kind of like a 2-page, the most famous one recently is the Netflix series Inventing Anna. So you watch the process of that kind of, I know it's dramatized, but that journalist spent ages researching and getting the sources. Another one, Film Spotlight, kind of goes through that process as well. Fascinating. You read these kind of like a couple of pages, and you don't realize that maybe like a year's work's gone into writing that article. And so you have that level of journalism, and then you have clickbaity, churning out headline journalism. And the fact that we even call the same thing, I think, is fascinating. But they both have merit in different ways, I guess, and we value them as a society in certain areas, and so they should both exist. But yeah, it's the journalistic thing, and even then, the way things are reported. I mean, we all know that PR is something you use to promote businesses, books. You use PR and you use press to do that. But yet, press and platforms are the place that we expect free speech. I don't know. Is our expectation wrong? Should we expect absolute free speech on any platform we go to, or is that not where free speech exists? And free speech is a concept. Can you ever really have it? Bearing in mind we all live in a society with various kind of constraints and expectations. Is it ever really true? Taboos. And what we're talking about now, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, we'd been cancelled. Women talking about giving birth and being old and their cervixes, like, publicly. Inform the elders. We'd have been. It changes, doesn't it? Our concept changes as time goes on. And
that's a really nice perspective, actually. The fact that actually, there's a whole, for me, I'm like, oh my God, that's really scary. But actually, when you put it like that, it's like, oh, there's a lot more free speech than there was, actually. So it's perceived as worse, but actually, on a general level, like even just this podcast and just this conversation, like you say, 50 years ago would have been like,
But also, 50 years ago, for us to be able, we wouldn't have had a platform for this, because these platforms like we're on now didn't exist. So you've got the ability to take this message to simultaneously, 2 or 3 different places, live. No one's stopping us. We came up with this on our own. Put it together without having to get it signed off by anybody. If we'd have wanted to do this 50 years ago, we'd have had to have a radio show commissioned, or been on the wireless, or whatever. This would never have got on TV. So we have the ability to say more of what you want is ubiquitous in the world. I think it's very easy to go, we shouldn't silence people, we can't cancel people. Let's look at actually the history of it, and who got to speak before. And we wouldn't have got to speak before. 50 years ago, we wouldn't have had this platform. So I think it's an interesting one.
That's a brilliant perspective. I love that. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I wonder what in 20 years we'll look at and think, wasn't it mad that we couldn't do that? I look at stuff now, and I will, just like my Remarkable and my phone and how everything's connected. And I look at how the business runs now versus, and like I said, we started the business pre-cloud software. Didn't exist. And I look at all the technology we used just on the day to day. We've just had this refurb done. My fridge has got Bluetooth. My fridge got my fridge plays music. It's got a camera in it, so I can go and see what's in my fridge. That's ridiculous. Like, tomorrow's world never prepared me for that. Like, that was not something that Like, I'm like, I've got a fridge that's got more technology than my first car. That's
Yeah.
It's probably got more technology than the first
Insane.
computer I ever had. Like, it's just
Mm,
wild. And I love thinking about in so when your kids are grown up, like,
mm.
what is the world going to look like in terms of
I
technology? What are we
I
going to
don't
be
think we can
doing?
even imagine it in some ways, right? If you look back and then go, well,
How
what? Because it's all
quickly it's
happening faster and
advanced.
faster.
Yeah, yeah. And cheaper and
Mm,
cheaper. Like, are we going to
mm,
be just zipping off to the moon for a day trip?
mm,
Like, is that a thing?
mm,
It's
mm,
or so I saw that they've just announced there's an airline that's doing a flight from the UK to Australia in one go now. So it's a
mm.
20-hour flight and there's no stopping. That seemed
Yeah,
completely impossible, like not that long
yeah,
ago. And now
yeah.
you could literally get there in a day. How crazy that you could get to anywhere in the world in a day.
In a day.
In a
Yeah,
day, like you're not
yeah.
that far from people, apart from Shetland, because my mum's recently moved to Shetland for
Has
reasons unknown.
she?
Yeah,
How
um,
come?
I don't know. Um, I'm a little confused by it. It was I'm a little baffled, but she's gone to live her dream and live out on Shetland. You
Yeah.
can't get to Shetland in a day. It takes like 3 planes and a canoe to get there. Like it's it's inaccessible.
It's so funny, isn't it? The places are much closer. It's like, nope, that's going to be really tough to get there. Australia, no problem.
No problem. Hop on a plane, you're there in a day. Shetland, I've got to do a stopover in Aberdeen. Like there's a whole thing. You can't get there if it's too windy. Yeah. There's no trees on Shetland. They don't have a single tree. It's too windy for trees.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting? Not a single tree
What's
walking
she going
around.
to do? What's she doing on Shetland? Is she retired? Oh, that's
Yeah.
fascinating to me.
No, she somehow managed to transport her job. So she's doing her job from Shetland, but she's also very much she's got her own kiln, so she's very much into glass work. And I don't know, she's just like living she's doing her, she's living her life on
Has
Shetland.
she moved on her own or has she got a partner? I don't
No,
know.
so her and her husband have moved, and they've taken my nan with me. But then also her sister, my auntie, has decided to move too. So they've all just moved to Shetland.
Okay, so she's like she's
She's
taken
like
a crew.
taken a little community, like a
That's
gang,
cool.
and moved to Shetland. Yeah, like just as you do. Just one day was like, I'm moving to Shetland. I'm like, well, of course you are. Why wouldn't you be? Sure, why not? Why not? Move to Shetland. It's true.
Epic. So now if you want to visit your mum, you have to get, like you said, 3 planes and a canoe.
Yeah,
Or
basically,
whatever
yeah,
it is.
yeah. It takes about 5 days.
Wow. That's nuts.
I know. Oh, funny, funny, funny.
Yeah. The paradox of like the new technology, and then there are places where no, you can't get anywhere that fast. No, you
Yeah,
can't have next day delivery. No, actually, when you try and do that, that's gonna feel really old fashioned.
your medical notes can't be centralized. You have to carry them around in a binder.
I can I still maybe I need to take a leaf out of your book, and there's a little part of me that wants to advocate for women who have kids to be able to, and Vicky, a really good friend of mine and joint venture partner, she's got 5 children. I think 3 of them were home births. Similar kind of, it's like that want for women to understand that they can do it
Yeah,
their way. They don't
yeah.
have to follow like what they're told. I'm not up for being an asshole to the medical profession. I think they're
No,
fucking awesome. My mum was a nurse.
yeah.
I'm not
They do
anti.
amazing work.
Like what they do is epic, and then sometimes they just need to leave people alone or trust that they'll be okay.
It's about
So
again.
there's
It's about. It goes back to I think listening to lived experience, doesn't it? And I think
yeah,
sometimes I think in all areas actually maybe we're not great at doing that. Is
yeah,
listening to people who've been through the thing, and so
mm,
they have these groups where you have like you have like expert patients. So I'm regarded as like an expert patient for like IUD stuff now.
mm,
Um, and they listened to my opinion, but I had to have that like label and go through the things and prove myself with my little set of data. But
mm,
I'm an expert patient. I get to be in the room for those conversations now. I think sometimes it's about having the right people in the room. Like if you've got
yeah,
a room full of people who don't represent the thing that you're doing, so you've got a room
mm,
full of medical professionals who
mm,
aren't women over 40 who've given birth in the way that you want to give birth, they're not
mm,
going to be able to advocate for
mm.
your beliefs or your tribe's belief, your set, your
And they've
community's
spent
belief.
most of their time seeing when it goes wrong, because actually the
Yeah, that's all they've
consultants are the
seen.
ones that pick up the pieces when
Yeah,
shit's gone wrong.
yeah.
So then there's also this thing of like, oh, that's what it's like. So
It's a bias.
we could cut out the risk and just literally
Yeah,
cut the baby out and not
yeah,
have to deal with all the natural birth thing. We'll
yeah.
just we'll just remove the risk and do it
Make
like
a
this.
more relatively controlled environment and do it that way. Yeah, and I think that there is something to be said for, but like the thing, isn't it? Sometimes being the person that has to do the changes is exhausting. like to be like, you're a busy person, like
Yeah.
to also take that on as well. You're like, oh, why me? Like, I'm Jewish, so there's always a little bit like, oh, why has it got to be me? We're very like, oh, why has it got to be me? Why has it got to
Us
happen to
again.
me? Yeah, us again. There's that like it's like genetic, I think. It's like, oh, what oy vey. But it's like, yeah, why has it got to happen to me? But do you know what? If not you, who? If
Yeah.
not you, who? And like you said, you are articulate and you are smart and you do have a voice and you are able to kind of, I think one of your talents is like getting people on to have interesting discussions. Yeah, why not you? And you'll actually find if you go out there, there's a whole bunch of people who will be so thankful that you did it, and you'll be amazed that if you think there's an issue and you've got an inkling there is an issue, just go and find out. Because when I did it, I still get messages on like Twitter and Instagram and stuff from women who've stumbled across the campaign and have literally messaging me going, I thought it was just me. I thought there was something wrong with me because I was in so much pain. Thank you so much for doing that. I can't believe it. And I've got messages from literally thousands of women going, I thought it was just me. I can't believe this happened to other people as well. I thought, and no one asked me about it, and so I never said anything. You'll probably find there's a whole bunch of people like that who'd be so grateful that you had the balls to speak up about it. Yeah, but it's sometimes being that flag bearer is hard work. It's
It is hard, right? I think
cross we bear.
Yeah, and it's important, I think, for people, to link it back to like money and business and all of that. It's like, it ain't freaking easy, but it's worth it. It's like, having those thousands of messages now from women saying, "Oh my God, thank you," makes it worth it, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, every time I'm like,
whoa.
And it felt so at the time. It felt very necessary because I was cross. I was really angry. Like I'd almost died, and I'd have to go through this as well. I was really angry about the whole thing. So anger like really fuels you, and then you're like, oh, I'm tired. Like I just want to watch Netflix for a bit. Like just give me a break. One day off. But it's super necessary. But actually, like running a business up, and also I think there's this like, why can't hard things be fun? Like we kind of think about like, things should be fun, it should be easy, or everything that's fun should be like, it should be like a happy, crazy, fun times or whatever else. Things that are hard can be really fun because they're super rewarding, and you got to see the thing that you did turn into something else, and that's amazing. And I think that we forget that. I don't know if we don't teach people that, and it's not that people don't know the value of hard work. I'm not going to be one of those people like, oh, kids today don't know how to work hard or whatever else. But I think there's something about kind of like, it's like you're not meant to be happy all the time. Like you haven't got to be in a state of euphoria 24/7. Like, and that doesn't mean you're depressed. It just means you're a human. Like you don't have to like constantly be like, woo, raving, life's a party. Like that's not it. And also, if you were like that all the time, it's all about perspective, right? Like if you're always constantly happy, like how do you get? And that's when
how do you know? You have to have the perspective. You have to be sad to know when you're happy as well, right? It's like you can't.
And every day we run the gambit of emotions. Like I can be euphorically happy and like mortally depressed within about 2 hours of each other. Like I'm like, oh, everything's terrible, and then 2 hours later I'm like, yes, I'm crushing life. Like, but I think that's
not talked about anywhere near enough either. Like people don't talk about the fact that that's actually normal.
So normal. Like I could be literally crying because 15 bad things happen in a row, and I drop my car keys. I'm like, oh no, my life's terrible. And then 5 hours later, I've like actually smashed it at something else. I'm like, yeah, I rule. Like, that's absolutely normal. Like I think that we don't. No one said, like, everyone's like, and I like the idea of, and I'm saying this as someone who's kind of like, you struggle with like anxiety and depression and stuff, and that's, I think it's learning the difference between, especially with anxiety, it's learning the difference between, should I be stressed and anxious about this thing? Like this, so when that, like all the stuff in the house is going on, it's quite stressful, and it was making me quite anxious, and I was like, right, this is normal response. This is a normal response to a stressful situation. If I wasn't feeling anxious, I'd be a psychopath. So that's absolutely normal. Like I'm grateful I feel like this, because I know that I have a fairly normal emotional range. It's when I'm like fretting over something that's completely impossible or spiraling or catastrophizing. I'm like, right, that's not a normal response to that trigger. Let's just recognize that, sit with it for a bit and do something about it. Likewise with kind of, you know, you can, if you've got depression, you can have a great day. You can have fun whilst you have depression.
Yeah.
You can have a lovely time. You can fall in love. You can do all this stuff whilst you have depression. It's just a version of your brain processing things. And likewise, you can be depressed and not have depression. You can be really sad for a long time, but not actually have depression. And that's also super normal. I think I don't know, we trying to like, we spend so much time like navel gazing and trying to like figure out like, oh, I felt sad today. Have I got this? Or I don't think, and actually, I think it's okay to like sit with how you feel for a bit, and all right to feel sad or happy or angry or whatever. Like that's absolutely, yeah. Absolutely.
And like you said, if you didn't feel any of that, you're a psychopath and there's a
literally,
problem.
you'd be a sociopath. If you didn't feel like that, there'd be something wrong with you. Definitely.
Yeah, so true, so true. Lucy, we're at 2 hours. I knew that when we started chatting, I'd be like, 2 hours would go like that.
When you said 2 hours, I'm like, oh, that's quite a long time. But actually, yeah, no, this, I could do another hour.
I have that same thing and then I'm like, no, there's some people, so I would love to chat again, if for no other reason, so that we can stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just do a podcast every now and again so we can keep in touch. Yeah.
Yeah, like every quarter we can talk about what's going on. And
yeah.
I love it. Just to wrap up and end, where are you? I'm saying just to wrap up and end. We could spend another 2 hours talking about this, but in a short version, where are you going? What's next? You know, you've tackled the medical profession around everything that we've talked about.
Yeah, so I sorted out medicine. That's done. Yeah.
How many days a week do you spend in Mazuma in the business?
Oh, I don't really keep track. So again, pre-COVID, we officially I was officially in work 3 days a week. But actually, it's a lot looser now. It's much more doing what's needed when it's needed, really. So it's a bit more kind of flexy in terms of that. I have a board, so we have monthly board meetings, and I have departmental meetings with people because we're around kind of 35 to 40 people now. So there's kind of more moving parts to kind of.
It's a big company, right? In terms of what you're dealing with.
Yeah, and we've got thousands of clients across the UK. So it's kind of like making sure that I feel like my role now is making sure everyone knows what their job is and then hold them accountable to it and making sure they hold themselves accountable. So it's much more about kind of directing than it is doing. So yeah, it's kind of a bit more free, but then I get plenty of time to do stuff like walk the dog or
write
a book, but do a bit more traveling. There it is. I bought one as well, like Alan Partridge, like got my own.
Woo-hoo.
Oh, it's so awkward, isn't it?
I have to say as well, I haven't acknowledged you for like, I now know. So I have a book that is currently nearly ready to come out, and I have so much love and respect for people who have done it, because now I've done it, I'm like, it's
such a process. Hard. It's such a process.
You end up with a book. It was a bit like you were saying, a news article, but actually it's taken someone, a year to do. It's the same with a book. It's like the amount of work that goes into a book.
You pour your soul into it, no matter what you're writing. Yeah, especially if it's something you're passionate about. You really. Writing a book's a process, and you also, if anyone is writing a book, my biggest words of advice would be to just write. Don't just write every day. It might be absolute shit, but write something, and you can just delete it. If it's rubbish, don't use it. But you have to get into that habit of writing. I'm a much better writer now than I was 4 years ago because I do it more. It's like anything, you get better at it. Also, when you've had a good writing day. Because I sometimes go back and read stuff I've written like a year ago, and I have no memory of writing it, none at all. I'm like, oh, that was brilliant.
You're reading it going, this is quite good. The person that wrote this is like this. And you're like, I wrote this.
Oh, it's me.
Cool.
Yeah.
Totally
So that's
that.
And that's like when you're in the flow, like you're in the zone. But no, I am. So we've got the company, we've got technology we're developing, so that's ongoing now, so we're kind of moving into that space. We've got some pretty ambitious growth plans for next year, so we're probably going to double in the next year, which is kind of big. But we spent like 2 years laying that foundation, so again, we'll double in 1 year, but it's literally been 15 years plus 2 years intense work to get to the place where we can double in a year. Like I couldn't have done that in year 4. It wouldn't have happened, or we'd have gone bankrupt because we didn't have the infrastructure to do it. So that when you look at high growth companies who double in years, there's a lot of foundation that goes into that, and a lot
there's
of
all the years before that don't count as the doubling, but actually
exactly
really a part of it.
all the learning experience, the product development, all that kind of stuff. So there's that. I want to get my little barn project creatively. I want to kind of sort that out because I think that'll be great, a lot of fun. I've set myself like a little goal. Like I'd love to be able to like walk up Pen y Fan again if I can like get myself on a personal goal. Like no matter how long it takes me, if I can do that, I think that's a big thing for me psychologically in terms of my health. And then just carry on doing it. Like I'm just kind of loving it at the moment. Just like I get to be creative. I get to spend time with people I love. I get to go places and eat nice food, and it's more of that, more of just more life stuff.
Have you got another book in the plan?
I do. Yeah. So this one
is
so this one's little sneak peek. So this one is more about the experience of. So I come from one of my things is I talk about being a woman in business a lot, and kind of especially in finance and technology in a very underrepresented space for women. So I'm writing about and I think stuff we touched on today, some of the assumptions that are made about you in a certain demographic, as what you can and can't do, societal expectations, and deconstructing some of the things that get said about women in business. And let's face it, only 1% of venture capital funding in the UK last year went to women, went to female-led businesses. So we still got, for all the equalities we do have in business, we've still got a long way to go. And I think that we're missing out on talent. I think there's so many talented people out there that we're missing out on because we've got these structures that don't work for them. And we're not getting people like the university structure and things like that. We're missing out on super talented people because we're forcing them down the route of going to university to take on a debt they don't need, when we could have got them into a business doing something super cool with an apprenticeship instead, and a different route in. So it's kind of about that, really. I think it's about kind of looking at what exists, why it exists, and then deconstructing it a bit and going, well, what might be a better way of doing it, and can we do it? So that's kind of working title.
That's a really exciting. It's a really exciting way of looking at it, because one thing that comes up for me, I'm a massive advocate of, look, anyone can do anything. I'm not an advocate of equal outcomes. I'm an advocate of equal opportunity. And what you've just said there is really interesting, because actually one of the things that Jordan Peterson talks about is like, women smash it as solicitors, lawyers, whatever you want to call, and then they get to 30 and they go, why am I working so freaking hard? I don't want to do this. I want to have kids, or I want to work differently, or I'm not doing it for the money. And what you said was, it's like finding what structure doesn't work. And it's like living like that doesn't work. And the best thing that I heard him say was when he said, we need to not ask women why they're leaving. We need to ask why men are so nuts to stay in that environment. And
exactly. So these structures we have in place, these structures we have in place, and actually they don't work for a lot of people, but we kind of, again, doing these things because we think we're supposed to do them. So why are we doing it? Like, can we have a structure that works differently? And it's not just around kind of you just say like getting women into opportunities, but it's about there are plenty of other underrepresented groups, so people with like neurodivergencies or neurodiverse people who the 9-to-5 pattern is not appropriate for them, but they're probably incredibly talented and could absolutely do fantastic things. Why have we got this obsession with this like 9-to-5 beige structure that only works for a very small group and then that's the thing that we judge whether you're successful or not by. So if you've managed to smash it in a 9-to-5 structure and hit C-suite or wherever in that structure, we go, well done, you've smashed it. Actually, if we had a more inclusive structure that would work differently for everybody, we'd see a lot more people not just being successful, but I think feeling successful. I think there's a lot of people, to finish off, we're out of time, but there's a lot of people who feel like they're not being successful because they're not hitting what we have called success. Actually, financial freedom,
if
all
we
that kind of stuff.
Redefine what that is, then
100%. If we redefine what that is, you won't feel like you won't have FOMO or feel like you're missing out. You'll feel successful in your own right, and surely that's what that freedom is about.
What a great note to end on. And I have to have you back now to talk more about all of that.
More about next. So much stuff.
Awesome. Lucy,
thank you so much for having me on. It's been lush.
You're welcome. And your journey, and I think because we knew each other then, and it's like it's so inspiring to be alongside and see what the benefit of time and patience and persistence be. So I just
Thank
really
you.
want to acknowledge you for living that and doing that and showing up anyway. And like, you've been through, you know, just the thing with like your leg and the blood clots and like that shit, and you carried on, right?
Yeah,
You came out with another book, you did the stuff, you kept going. It's just inspiring to hear your story and your journey, and like really know it. This isn't, you know, for people listening, I've known you for years, and it's not a blowing smoke up your backside.
I can't believe it's been nearly 2
story.
decades we've known each other. That's frightening.
I know.
That's so
We need
frightening.
like a reunion every
Oh my
decade or something now.
I think we look better than we did when we were younger, though. I think we're doing it well.
Amen to that.
I think we're doing it well.
You know, I think that's the game. Like, if people actually went, actually, what's possible if I take stuff on, if I do the boring, the results are sexy. Like, look at us. You just said we look better than we did.
Also, how depressing to think you peaked at 26. Like, that's depressing, isn't it? There's a lot of life after 26. I hated that was my peak.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing that I've always, you know, when people go, oh, I don't want to get older, I'm like, I love getting older. I earn more money
privilege.
and I care less what people think.
Massive privilege getting older.
School.
Massive privilege to get older. A lot of people don't get that chance.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's amazing, Lucy. Well, we're going to finish up here, and we will definitely do this again soon.
Thanks for having
me
me
on.